All right, all right. So let's talk about Road Roaster Coffee, right? My good friend Scott Steenson, his wife Chrys, they run this company, Road Roaster Coffee. It's here in Northern California, out of the hills here out of Chico, up in Forest Ranch. Met Scott and Chrys at the local farmers market Saturday morning a couple years back. We started talking, realized we had so much in common. Dude loves metal and guitar, off to the races right away. So I started drinking the coffee there because he had a bunch of cool names, one called Hella Dark, one called Metalhead. So I had to try out all the coffees, and then after a while I started realizing the wisdom that Scott had was just acquired by simply doing a lot of it. He was like really curious about like the ways in which you can affect the overall taste and smell and experience of coffee through the art of roasting. I really enjoy Espresso Lane roast. This is a medium dark espresso roast coming from Brazil and Colombia, the two different beans, right? I mess with this one, and I mess with the Hella Dark. I mess with the Kick Ash. That's another medium dark blend that's super good. The Quarterly Coffee has been killing it. It is from Papua New Guinea. It is incredible. It's a single origin roast, and normally I like a blend, but this single origin is just right. It's got all this magic flavor, what you would expect. You'd have to combine two beans to get this type of flavor profile, and you get it from one bean. They still have some on the website. I think you can still order right now, Papua New Guinea. And the deal here is that we switched it up, giving you 15% off of every order, ongoing, single time purchases, reoccurring purchases. You set up a reoccurring shipment every month, no problem, 15% off every time. Just continue to use the Players Pick coupon code. You can pass it around, send it to your friends. Got you a hookup over at roadroastercoffee.com. Players Pick is the coupon code. So yeah, check it out. Great coffee, great people. Enjoy.
Players Pick podcast. Picks and perspective with Chrys Johnson. Palpable. Paradox. Polarity.
Yo, can you hear me?
Peach.
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, dude.
What's
Good to
going
see you,
on?
Kilian.
Nice to see you, man.
Yeah, man, it's been a minute since we chatted.
Yeah, for sure, dude. How's your holiday week going so far?
Whew. It started off kind of rough. It's kind of rough, like just it's a lot of stress going around this season, it feels like, I think that's really what it comes down to. And I'm one to kind of stress, as much as I have a plan in place for not being stressed out. Boy, I stress the fuck out, on shit.
Same.
I'm always like trying to work out and go do yoga, breathe, meditate, and then also it's almost like I do that shit, and then I think I've got extra like room in my life for more stress.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, oh, I did all this stuff to not stress out so I could afford to stress out a little bit. That's like stupid.
making room in the trunk. Yeah.
Yeah, man. How about you?
Not too bad, man. Honestly, I had a really good corporate gig on Friday. It was good, so like wedding band stuff, and then this weekend I'm arranging some plans. So with Fallujah, we're doing 70,000 tons of metal, and so I guess I'm doing a bass clinic on there. So just handling the logistics with that, and then getting ready to go to Vegas soon. And so it's just like that. My mom's coming up tomorrow, so tomorrow will be nice to like just have some family time and disconnect a little bit, and just practice in the morning, and then just hang out with my mom and just enjoy the holidays.
Cool, man. That's great. Yeah. And where are you at? Are you in Colorado or something, or where are you?
I live 20 minutes north of Boston. I live in a town called Woburn, so it's literally like I'm 20 minutes from like Fenway Park, basically.
Oh shit.
Yeah.
For whatever reason, I thought you were in the middle of the country and not on the far East Coast. That's a trip.
No, yeah.
And you, man, so and you're like all over the place with like you're one of the guys. Like that's like, this is the thing that I love about you is like one of the bands that I know that are in my sphere, they announced tour and they're like, yeah, we don't have a bass player, so Kilian's with us this tour. It's like, what, you were in that band too, bro? Well, just this tour. I'll be
Yeah,
so you stay busy, dude.
I thankfully, and I'm very grateful for that, is that since COVID has kind of, been less impactful on our travel restrictions and things have happened, things have picked up. I'm gonna be really grateful to, you know, what do you call it, Andrew and Scott and Kyle in Fallujah for like taking me on a bunch of adventures this year, Neely and a bunch of other things. So like, um, you know, it's considering where we were a year and a half ago, or even like a year ago. I can't really complain because this year has been I've traveled the most I think I have in my entire life this year, and it's been a good thing. It's been a good thing.
Wow.
Yeah, man.
So how did you manage through not being able to travel? Like, were you still be able to do like online lessons, or how did you fill in your income with all that being gone?
So when it first hit, I had to be on unemployment for a little bit. Yeah, that was a thing, during the first half of 2020.
Yeah.
And yeah, thankfully at the time, a lot of people were taking bass lessons, so that was, a big aspect of that. And then, like, I would just try and find more recording projects and do odds and ends, help friends with, if they needed help with things, like, oh, you're building a shed or something like that, like, I would try and do little things like that,
Mm,
just because 2020 was way more like a survival mode kind of situation, you know what I mean, for all of us.
absolutely.
Um, and I do have one of my jobs. I work for um, one of my guitarist's wife, our friend, doing her social media management, and so I do some of that. And so it's just like one of the things where just like taking the year, day per day. You know what I mean? But
Mm,
thankfully in 2021, things started to pick up. I was able to teach at Berkeley again for the summer thing, for like the weekend thing that they did. So that was like my first like, oh, things are starting to get back to normal, and teaching with Victor and stuff like that, and the faculty there. And then throughout that fall, things slowly started picking up. Um, around here locally, like I got a lot more gigs for like wedding, corporate gigs, which I love
sure.
doing. I have no problem doing those because I think they're a lot of fun. And then this year was more okay. Now we're traveling again. Now we're doing the standard issue scenario of what's going on, and thankfully it's leading into 2023. So, knock on wood here that continues to be the case. So yeah,
Great, man. I'm glad that you were able to swing through, man. I know a lot of people. I mean, it's one thing to survive the whole thing, and it's another thing to like come out the other side and still have your mental health too. Like I think that has been difficult, and because we're not completely free from the scenario. The
yeah, yeah,
scenario
yeah.
still like it's still lingering. Depending, and even though it's pretty much normal life for the most part, there's just this weird cloud that still kind of like lingers in the background around like we might shut things down for if it gets, and you're like, oh man, like great.
Yeah. No, no. I think and that's one of the things that I was actually kind of really refreshing. I'll never forget it. Was and it's more like how candid people are about their struggles now, and I mean that in a good way because I think
Mm,
that the problem that happened was during COVID is that everyone tried to put on their like influencer face, online social media, like, no, things are cool, man. I'm just hustling on a different grind, whatever. And
mm,
then I'll never forget the first wedding gig I did. I was so stoked in like last autumn.
mm,
No, and it's beautiful like estate and stuff like that. But I'm like so happy to be playing like a good paying gig, like whatever. It's a wedding gig, but I'm like there with my bass. I'm like stoked. And the drummer and a bunch of people, he's like, "Oh yeah, man, do you kind of lose your mind last year too?" And then the more big touring musicians I met, you know, they all struggled almost to a T. All of them struggled in some way. Anyone in
mm,
the industry, but it was cool in a sense. Like obviously, it's not cool that they struggled, but more the fact that the conversation of normalizing the fact that hey, it was okay to not be okay, and this kind of like BS of like uh, putting on airs, facades of like oh no, everything's just grinding, bro. You know what I mean? Kind of became like gauche in a way. You know what I mean? Like, and
mm-hmm.
where it became good that people just had discussions about mental health and like that. You're on a tour bus with people or you're sharing that stuff like that. People just say like, oh yeah, man, like like oh I had a rough time with this or whatnot, and so it builds a camaraderie in the community of like we all kind of went through the ringer, and I think that what was horrible, and it was. I think it was very refreshing to hear how candid people were in terms of that it happened to them, and thus it normalizes people looking for help or for reaching out to their fellow musicians to like feel that sense of, okay, so I'm not crazy. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like we were all in the same boat, and I think that that's something that I've definitely noticed it on the tours that I've been on. Whether it's bands I've been on tour with or musicians I meet there or music fans that work in the industry, is that just like you know it's very humanizing. It connected everyone in a way that, like, apart from a very few handful of people, everyone had their moments where they were like, okay, this is kind of nuts. And I think that was a good thing, is just to see that, like, we're normalizing the conversation about, like, when people aren't feeling well, that they don't have to feel like isolated in that, especially when it's something that's happening to society, not just an individual.
Right. I think part of what I hear you outlining too, and I love that you focus on that aspect, like, hey, what it did suck, but there's these gifts that it gave us, right? And this
Yeah.
thing, and a couple of things that I feel thankful for is it normalized a lot more people that could be working from home that didn't need to be in a commute.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people that, like, just that's the old way of doing things. And I've worked in plenty of those offices where the boss, the owner, can't imagine you actually working if you're not at the office.
Yeah.
And so like, it normalized a lot of that for a lot of people. Also, there's a big learning curve with working it from home and being on your own time. So like that can affect mental health, and that there's a pendulum swing around that. Like some people kind of just, you know, whoa, I'm working from home. And then, oh shit, like I also don't have the camaraderie. I don't have the connected feeling of being in the office, which can take a
Yeah.
little while. You have to over communicate. Like I've worked from home off and on for about 4 or 5 years before the pandemic, but then when the pandemic hit and it was definitely settled in, I was like, oh man, I have to like get better at my communication, because I'm just at a distance and everybody's at a distance now, and it's like I have to do that because otherwise it's too easy to like kind of screw it up. But I remember a few years back, one of my best buds, he his family lost his house in one of the fires up here in Northern
Oh,
California.
that's horrible. Yeah.
I mean, I know a lot of people now that, there's been so many fires, but before the last couple of really big fires, there was a fire up by Mount Shasta. And my buddy Troy, him and his wife and 2 kids, they had bought this land in Weed, California, and the fire rolled through quickly, and they took everything. And of course, on its face, everybody's like, man, that sucks, man. Let's all help Troy out. And he was like, of course, thankful for, he had to normalize being helps, because he's a dude that always helps everybody else.
Yeah.
Like he's like a fabricator and all this stuff. But then I remember I gave him one of my guitars because he lost all of his instruments. And going up to visit him, he was like, man, he's like, I wouldn't wish it upon anybody, but this is one of the best things that ever happened to me, is to lose everything and just to start over and like to move forward. And we had this long conversation around it. And one of the things that I really appreciated about that outlook was, it does, it highlight when tragedy happens or we're forced to shift, we often find out like how attached we are to our patterns and all this stuff, right? And it can be like there's a grieving process involved sometimes with letting those things go and having to start over. And and in some ways, like I think a lot of people wish for a lot of big systemic change in the world, but yet would have a really hard time if we were really actually changing on a big level into a new modality, right? So, and this is kind of like a mini version of that, where we're like, hey, are we sure you're capable to like adapt and move on?
Yeah.
I don't know.
One of the things, in a way, that it's kind of based off what you said, was kind of that I found, especially in the European tour, because we had, almost half the shows were sold out, or we had kids all the way to the back, and the enthusiasm. And I think what it was also, like, here in the U.S., especially Canada, the places that had really strict restrictions, the kids were so stoked to go to the shows, and I think it was because they had to live with it being taken away, like the fire taking away the house. Shows were gone, and you saw like this genuine enthusiasm and like love for playing. And as a musician, it was giving me like so much life. You know what I mean? Like being on stage in a room full of kids that are just absolutely elated and having a fucking blast. You know, there. And not taking it for granted. I definitely got that vibe, especially on the European tours. Like none of them were like seemed like cynical or jaded about it. They were like really enthusiastic and happy that we were all there. And you know, when you meet fans, you know, it was very much like a positive vibe from that. And I think it was because I think they felt that sense that like, oh, this we lost this for 2 years, like, and how much that made them happy. You know, because for a lot of people, you know, that you know love music but aren't in music, whatever. They can't play a musical instrument or they just don't do a profession or whatever. Shows is the way that they get that energy out of their body. It's a mental health cleansing. It's generally mental health stuff for them. So for them to go into a metal show or any show even and like just get lost for, you know, an hour and 15 minutes during your set and just freak out and have some beers and hang out with their friends and like sing lyrics and just mosh or be funny, you know what I mean? Like that shit for them, that's the highlight. That's the things that, you know, the little things you look forward to, you know? And I think that was, you know, like how your friend like lost his house, but then all of a sudden it's like, oh, but the restart. And I felt that what happened in 2019, I'll never forget because I was talking with our mutual friend, Sarah Longfield. Longfield was saying that like she went to a show, I don't know what band it was, but it was a friend of hers. And that like, even though they were a big band, attendance was kind of down for it because at that point touring had been so like it was almost oversaturated and people were getting jaded by like the tour cycles kind of thing.
Sure.
And it's almost in a weird way, as fucked up as it is, and obviously it's not that it was a good thing, but having COVID and taking it away has made people be like, and I think it's going to be a generational thing where people are like, no, we got to appreciate this now. We can't be cynical about it. They're like, oh, they'll come back next year or like whatever. People are now like, oh no, like we should get tickets for the show because not saying that COVID will take it away, but just more like the general consensus of, you know, this whole thing, the assumption of permanence of something, you know, and I felt that was it was a good thing. And as a musician, it was it gave me a lot of life on these past couple of tours. And even like, even like when I did like, you know, local gigs where I would be doing paid, you know, session work or whatever and whatnot. You just felt even people like at a bar in Salem wanting to hear some tunes were like just generally like, yeah, like they were about it. And I think it's because they missed that and they realized like, oh crap, like this actually was something that I needed for my well-being. And now like it's like an appreciation of it.
I love that outlook too. Yeah, you're pointing out really good pieces here. I really remember as a young person prior to being in the industry, how big of a deal the shows were to me. Like I'm a little jaded because I've been to a bazillion shows and I rarely buy tickets to anything for the last decade and a half.
Yeah.
I'm spoiled as fuck. But prior to that, I was like a connoisseur. I would spend all my extra money if it wasn't going to band space rental, you know, to like be able to jam with my musicians. It was going to like concert tickets trying to get there, you know, because I knew when I was going to get there, man, there was going to be other people that were freaking hyped on what we were about to witness.
Yeah.
You know, and it was a special event and we had, and it was such a sweet break from the rest of our lives, you know, like we were grinding on some stupid job that we weren't really, you know, stoked on most of us. And so when we got there, we're like, all right, you know, I'm looking around and people are hyped, you know, especially for me, like the biggest ones were in the early days, we're traveling, going to see Pantera. That was like, it was a club that you were in. And if you liked that thing, if you understood what it meant to be in that particular pit, bro, like it was a life-changing event, you know, and
100%,
And then then whatever any like the favorite bands, Meshuggah has always and will still always be like one of those bands for me. I captured a little bit of that vibe in San Francisco when they were here a few months ago, and I took one of my best buddies, my buddy Don, that does all these cool custom ceramics.
Oh, nice.
Iron Grizzly Creations. But we've been friends since high school and done a ton of shit together, been in bands together, and he's a dad and doesn't go to shows very often. I'm like, bro, you got to like get in the car. Like, we got to do this for old time's sake, dude. Let's drive. I'll drive. Let's go. And it just all like worked out in this super sweet way. And I was like, no, man, like, we're not going to stand up there. We have to go down into the pit. And I was holding a Kiesel guitar. I had a headless guitar, and I was like down in the pit.
Oh my God.
And all of a sudden, like in the middle of this first song, everything just erupted and I got enveloped into it. And I was just like, I'm just going to go with it, man. This guitar, it'll be fine, And like, I moshed around in there with it. And then it was just one of those things where I was like, oh yeah, I remember this is like, it's easy to get jaded and to kind of like push it aside. And you're like, oh no, I do this all the time, whatever. But the specialness returning to the event I think it's good for everybody, the spectators, right, and obviously great for the performers to have a resurgence of people taking it more seriously and not like, oh, I'll catch them next time, like, and because I think, and you'll probably attest to this, like to hear your outlook, and because you're in the middle of it and you're a very busy musician yourself, so it's like, in a way you want to normalize. I would imagine you want to normalize not having to be on the road all the time and still be able to make a living, right? Like that's because we've kind of shifted that way. We're like, oh, we don't make any money with music. You have to sell a ton of merch and be on the road all the time to like make money, and that sucks.
Yeah, and thankfully, like the bands I'm involved in, like their tour cycles are like reasonable. Like Fallujah, apart from what do you call it? 70K, is taking this spring to just do, hustle work. And then I think we have some plans for the summer, and then some other stuff will fill in for the spring stuff for me. But yeah, I cherish my times at home. And thankfully it's not so much where it's like, oh, I have to leave like every second. I will have stretches at home that are substantial, which gives me a grounding effect. You know what I mean? So, in an ideal world, like you have kind of a balance between the two things. But I will say that, like, as a most part, after COVID, I'm liking that my experience with my career is more involved with doing the thing versus like. So I'm not against, like, I think there are positive aspects of social media. Like, I've like met people in other parts of the world that have seen my videos. You know what I mean? Like, it's awesome. Like, I ran into a guy at a corporate gig in Deerfield, Massachusetts, middle of nowhere, and he's like, dude, are you the bass player from Scale Something? I'm like, yeah. So I'm grateful for that outreach of that. But I will say, for me, as someone who used to do a lot of bass videos, and I'll still do them, but like, it's been nice that like I'm like, okay, like I'm gonna go travel to Las Vegas to play with these musicians versus like I gotta create videos. You know what I mean? Like, or stuff like that, where like I'm traveling to do the thing like that I wanted to do when I was a kid versus like, and again, I have no problem with doing the online hustle, and that it's a part of being a musician these days. But I've been very grateful that my plans involve I'm gonna physically go to a place and perform, and that's been the thing that I've been enjoying the most. Like, I'm stoked that Neely hit me up to go do that thing in January, and like apparently we might have like Satriani sit in with us and stuff like that. And like that's an experience that I couldn't recreate online. Like, even if I was on a session with him online, that's still awesome. That's awesome. I'm not saying that isn't sick as fuck.
It's not the same.
Yeah, but being in the physical presence of those people and seeing it in real time, I think is the thing I've been the most grateful for. To like, be on a stage. I think that's the thing that has made my soul very happy.
Yeah, well, and that is yet another good point, because it's we oh, hello. It's, I think in a lot of ways the pandemic trained a lot of people into that space that wouldn't have never really embraced it, to try to be influencer or whatever, just be online, have a presence to like do that stuff. So it's good for some of the people that weren't already doing it, I guess. But I will say that, you know, with the overload of being online, like it's got the actual old school analog of like getting in a van or a bus and driving to the thing and traveling and performing on stage, and you especially probably, you know, just being able to be a part of a band that has people that take care of the social media stuff. For the most part, you can do your own part, but like you get to be, just go there and arrive and perform and get off stage and
be
go.
a bass player. Yeah. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, it's like, don't get me wrong, like I don't mind making TikTok videos, but
Right.
I'll never forget like every, you know, rock bio I've read, like Duff McKagan was in Guns N' Roses. He's like, he was there to play bass, you know what I mean? And that was his job. Like, I'm playing bass in this band. So like, as much as I am not a Luddite at all, like I don't mind making, like, we made a fun video on the European tour that, like, you know, got like a couple, like, you know, way over 100,000 views, stuff like that. We made a fun thing that went viral. But like, you know, for me, that's not, I'll never make that my modus operandi. Like, for me, it's like,
Yeah.
I don't mind doing that because it's a way to keep, oh, look, oh, that's right, that's what's happening. It keeps the conversation going. But I never wanted to focus. I've always felt that, like, the way I cultivate my social media stuff is so that the focus is on my playing and the projects I'm involved in. Like, that is the focus. It's not so
Right.
much. It's not so much for the meme factor or the video itself. It's about, like, oh, this guy plays with X people, and like, oh, that person's going to be on tour. Oh, their band's releasing a record. Like, you know, as much as, like, of course, like, if more followers on platforms follow me, I'm super grateful. I think that's awesome way to discover. But it's always been a conduit towards the main goal, not the goal itself. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, so that's the thing for me. Is like, if I make a video tomorrow and I become TikTok famous, that would be cool. Like, I'm totally fine with that. But the goal would never be to be TikTok famous. It would be that it's, hey, look, now all these people are here. Check out the fact that I'm going to be on tour with real musicians or with bands, you know, and I'll be in locations and do that. That's for me is the way that I view it.
Yeah, it's a tricky thing, because I've had a lot of people in my sphere ask me, you know, like, what should I focus on, you know, and I'm like, well, because they're like, they look to me like, I'm like, well, I'm not famous on any level, but I know a bunch of people that have clout, right, and that's great, and it's different for every person, and in this, if you were starting out right now, like it's difficult, because the question that invariably always happens with me is like, well, how do I get a deal with Kiesel, or how would you advise me to be ready, you know, for the endorsement deal? How do I get endorsement deals and all that stuff? And it's like, well, you know, it used to be that for sure that you just had to be a badass and play live and go tour a lot. You had to be in a band that was in front of people. But now, like, you can be in front of people from your bedroom, and, you know, and honestly, being in front of people physically is strangely less, like, sexy to most brands. Like, I'm not saying it's not sexy. It is. Like, if you're in a big ass band and you're playing arenas, you know, great. Like, they're also like, yeah, so what's your social numbers? You know, like, that's great that you play to stadiums, but like, do they have a social following? Because if they don't have a social following, you know, this is not every brand. I'm just saying this is the conversations that I end up in all the time, right? Because we're looking for the combination of both. But more than anything, that's like one of the first things we check. We flip over, what's their gram like? Oh, they don't have a lot of interaction there. Oh, but their YouTube is strong. Okay, let's go over to YouTube. Oh, okay, cool. All right, well then, like, if they're playing and they're solid, okay, then we can consider them. So it's an interesting thing, you know. Like, I do favor ultimately the return to a predominantly more analog version, you know, where you hone your craft and you hit the road, because there is a certain kind of weirdness around, like, if you get sucked into the online thing predominantly, that you're, and I suffer from this a bit too, is where I just, like, I want to create a reel and then go on with the rest of my day, and I don't practice enough to actually be good at the thing that I'm just like, you know, I'm just jamming today. Okay, cool. Oh, I don't have time to actually be good at my instrument right now. So I'm going to move on and do other things. And I'm sure you witness a lot of that, being a teacher.
Yeah, for me, what it was that, like, especially during COVID when I was making a lot of videos, it was that, like, I tried to really push the envelope to what, people were seeing. I tried to diversify my stuff. So, like, I would do like a crazy slap video one day, then I'd do a Motown cover, then I'd cover a Jaco Pastorius song, then I'd do like a Palladino line, then I'd do some crazy metal shit. And the reason was just because, like, I didn't want to be pigeonholed, and that's one thing that I think is, for me, was the thing. It was the fear of being pigeonholed as something. You know what I mean? And don't get me wrong, I know that a lot of people know me from playing in a lot of prog metal and prog rock projects, but I think that I was successful in a lot of ways of, like, not being like, oh, he's just a metal bass player at all. And I think it's helped me a lot because I actively made the effort to, like, show people that, like, I play a lot of different things. But yeah, no, I agree with you in the sense like that, because, like, a brand would want it to be like, again, it's to sell product. You know what I mean? Like, again, like, if I make a video with keyboard bass and the logo is very easily displayed, you can hear the bass clearly. That's better for ROI, for when Keysill would, give me a bass, whatever.
It's measurable, right?
It's more measurable, 100%. So I think it's always like a balancing act. It's one of the things why I like how Carstairs does his Twitch account, because it is about, the gleam and, like, the followers and the subs for that stuff, but it never loses the sight of Fallujah and that. And I think that that's what I like about it, is that, he's on there, with his Twitch followers, it is, fun. There are the memes, like, we have each one of us have a little emoji in the chat, stuff like that. It's all good, but it's to build, I remember someone said this, it's to build a community, not an audience. And I think that that's a cool thing. So, like, and I think that that's kind of the best way that you can, is because, like, if you are making videos, a lot of times you have an audience, and that's cool. But the ideal thing was that you build a community around that, which is, I think, what he's done with his Twitch, where it's like, people just show up to do that, and musicians. So he's still influencing people with the music, but it never loses sight of the main goal. And for me, that's what I've always wanted to do with my stuff. So when I do a video, I want to showcase my skills, but at the same time, I'll balance it out with being like, look, like, I'm also going on tour. I'm doing the thing. I'm, like, doing that. And it's always this balancing game that I've always done, so that I personally prided myself where, like, I can't be necessarily pigeonholed into a certain thing. And some people would say, like, oh, well, wouldn't you rather just go in a single lane? And for me, I feel like that's part of my thing, is that I would rather be that anyone could hire me to do a gig, and I'll be able to provide the low end at the exact same quality, regardless of the genre that you hire me in. And it's a goal. It sucks because I can't just do one type of video, because there's a lot of people who do, shred videos, and it's just shredding. It's only slap bass. It's only grooves. For me, I've also one of these people that, like, even though I'm living a lot of my dreams now, and, like, I've definitely never had, like, a big break, like, where I was 23 and all of a sudden I rocket to the moon, and, like, I like play in a single type of thing. For me, like, the reality of it is, like, when I graduated music school, I would have to do, theater pit gigs, and I do jazz brunches. Then, like, when I was playing with Felix, I'd go and play with Felix somewhere, so it was never this, by playing, I could never rest on my laurels of, like, being like, oh, well, I just play this style. Because if for me, it was either, well, you can either get these gigs and make money doing what you love, or you can do more day job shit. So for me, it was like, well, I'd rather be playing bass and pay my rent with bass. So the more I was able to just do more gigs, that just allowed me to do more styles of music. And for me, I'm also unique, not unique, but just, like, I'm not like a lot of other musicians, where for me, if they're good musicians I'm playing with, I'll most likely have a great time. You know what I mean? So the genre is kind of almost irrelevant. If the musicians are authentic and good, I can usually have a good time.
Man, I think it's such a gift that you said, you made the statement of, like, I didn't blow up in one genre and then have to be beholden to that thing. And I've seen I know a lot of people on both sides of that coin, like, and I'll use, like, Devin Townsend for an example, like somebody that is well known, international, has a massive, amazing career. And part of the magic of what worked for him is similar, right? He didn't blow up in one particular thing to the point where he had to stay there and the fans wouldn't let him do something else, right?
Yeah,
He always kept putting out random, even though he would kind of stay the course and still keep evolving his thing, his main thing. He always would drop a weird album and here or there a weird project, and you're like, oh, he just got used to Devin doing whatever the fuck he wants. And then you create a community of people that surround that, and they're like, wow, I just support the fact that he's different than everybody else. He allows himself to explore all his interests. And I think that, you know, you're a widely interested musician, so on one level, like, it's probably just natural for you to be curious about all the different genres and just be a player versus letting yourself get pigeonholed into one spot.
I like playing the instrument still. Like, it's one thing that, like, I'm really happy about, where, like, I don't, like, of course I take breaks, especially when I come back from a tour. I won't play bass for a little bit, just to, like, it's also good to, like anything in life, like, even if you love something, space between it is good. But, like, I genuinely like practicing and playing. So, like, like, and I do stuff also to keep myself refreshed and stuff. So, like, recently I've been practicing a lot of guitar because I got like one of the retro solos last year, and just because I was so busy during this year with touring and getting ready for the Fallujah stuff, and running around, I didn't get a lot of time to play the guitar that much.
Mm.
But then, when I came back from this tour, like a couple of weeks ago, I just started like picking up the guitar every day and doing that. But, like, I genuinely do enjoy just playing bass guitar. And so I think that's one of the things where, like, it's like there are people who like playing instruments, but then, like, the genre, like, would kill it for them, kind of thing. And for me, it's not the genre that kills it for me. It's if, like, it would kill for me if I'm around people that are shitty musicians that just suck. You know what I mean? Like, that they're really mid, and, like, it's not even about chops. It's more like the fact that, like, they're just bad. You know what I mean? Like, they're just that would be a soul crusher. But, like, normally, like, thankfully, I've cultivated like friends where, like, everyone's like, even the wedding bands I play in, the cover bands, like, people are talented. So, like, when the vocalists I'm singing with are good vocalists, the drummers, I'm so grateful. I haven't played with a shitty drummer in so long. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So even if it's a groove, like, a top 40 song that might be on its face a little cringy, sometimes, like, that cringy song can be amazing with like the right musicians, because they just spin it in a way, and all of a sudden you're just rocking out, having a lot of fun.
Mm.
And yeah, I think that's the thing. And I always try and find different things to, like, if feel like a little burnt out in something, I'll go and do something like that. So, like, like a couple of years ago, I was kind of like burnt out. Like, I felt like, I hit like what the plateaus that people do, and so I just started. I bought like a chicken picking guitar video on how to do that, because a lot of my chops from bass thankfully translate to guitar, and stuff that would be hard for guitar players, like alternate or like hybrid picking stuff, is easier for me because I already have the independence of my fingers. So I, like, spent like a couple of weeks just like learning chicken picking licks. But
That's
that was
awesome.
fun for me, because even though I'm not like a country fan by any means, it was fun to play that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like there's also a lot of genres where, like, I don't necessarily listen to it for fun, but man, is it fun to play. Like, I feel that way about a lot of jazz. Like, so, like, I like jazz fusion, but, like, straight up jazz, I don't necessarily listen to as much recreationally. But oh man, it's so much fun to, like, pick up and learn voicings, and, like, learn passages, and, like, get stuff going. So there's, like, things that are fun in different perspectives, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so you end up learning something from the form, and just by trying to adopt the form in a way. I can hear that. I mean, because I don't listen to country or anything really, but I mean, I like country inspired things, like and kind of alt country stuff more. But you spend a little bit of time in Nashville and you meet some really nice, like, straight up like modern country people, and you find out, you're like, oh, I at least I did, like, I used to work with Miranda Lambert, like, band, and her and all, and I was like, oh, I kind of was like about going down to, like, hang out with them. I was work, I gotta, but then I immediately fell in love with all the people, and I was like, oh, these people are, like, genuinely good people, and I like, And then I just saw the music and heard the music in a different way, and I was kind of like, okay, it's not my thing, but like I got respect for y'all in a different way,
Yeah.
because they're world class musicians there too. I mean, you know, Nashville's known for the chops and for its proficiency. So
Yeah, and it's also like you start musicians that are so good at things. Even then, like I'll give you an example. One of my bass students, he's a really nice guy. His name's William Shively. He's the bass player for Boys to Men, and so
whoa,
yeah, so he's an awesome guy. He's an older guy than me, but like he's like super sweet guy. And so one day he goes like, "Hey, you want to come see Boys to Men?" And like I grew up with them listening to them, but it's not music that I like bought or whatever. Like you know what? Yeah, fuck it, let's go see Boys to Men, and it was awesome. They were sick as fuck, and I was like, dude. And I told people like, dude, if you ever want to go see Boys to Men, go do it because they're really good.
oh man,
And it was one of the things where I just was open to that experience of being like, you know what? Yeah, I remember the songs, but it's like it's a lot of love ballads. I was in second
yeah.
grade, like well, I can't really relate to this music, you know what I mean? And it was a little bit before my time, But like, I remember the songs. But I went to go see him live, so sick,
Bro,
just
that was
absolutely.
my time. I did spend money on that shit.
They're
Like
great.
I
They're sick.
yeah.
I can't say I cannot say anything. The band was really nice too. I didn't get to meet any of the guys, the main vocalists, but the musicians, all
Yeah.
really nice dudes. But they're all destroyed. They're all wicked
Oh,
good
I
musicians. So
bet.
like watching people that are on that level play that music, just as a musician, you're just like, oh, that's sick. Like that's just so well played.
Yeah. Yeah. No, there's that it and I think that's like, akin to, living in one area most of your life and developing ideas about people you don't know and other areas. Like like you based on somebody's report, right? And you're like, and people in like it's like you never really meet any people that make country music. You're like, country music's all lame, all talking about trucks and dirt roads,
Yeah.
and but then you travel somewhere, maybe to Nashville or to the South somewhere, and you interface with the people and you see the music firsthand. It's you get a different perspective, and like I don't know. I think about that like just in life, right? Like you don't ever get out of this country, and you might have based on the area you lived in, you might have a bunch of racist people talking shit about Mexicans, but then you go to Mexico and you like meet the people, and you're like, whoa, okay, like different.
Yeah.
It's important, I think. My,
Exposure.
yeah, the exposure
Exposure.
part of it.
Yeah.
I always enjoyed listening to different kinds of jazz stuff, but it still kind of feels like magic to me because it's such a complicated like
Mhm.
voicing and all these things. But I did take a little bit of jazz lessons in college, and that teacher, he was just really adamant. He's like, I know, Chrys, you want to be a metal guitar player. That's great. Also, if you would study everything other than metal, you'll be a better metal player. Like you should diversify your influences and just like listen to and take inspiration from all quadrants of
Oh,
life,
100%. Well, Cars is one of the things that he likes listening to, which is funny because we all love jamming with it in the van when we do van tours. Is he found? I think his little brother Logan introduced him to like these '70s like funk artists, but they're Japanese. So
Oh,
it's
sick.
Japanese funk artists, but they're like so good. It's like late '70s, eight like funk like thing, but it's all Japanese. But they're like the nastiest funk bands ever. So we'll like listen to like Japanese like like boomer funk, but it's like but it's sick as fuck. So you like kind of enjoy that, but like it's that's one of the reasons he can do that. And I found that the people like it's also like I can tell with bass players like if you only listen to metal and you play bass a certain way, I can tell immediately because it's a touch
Yeah.
thing. Like and I go like, but
Mm,
people who are like really sick metal bass players, you know, they the dynamics within it, you can tell that they've played a lot of different things. You know what I mean? So you're just like,
yeah.
you know what I mean? Like, well, like Evan, like the reason me and Evan both do this because, like, I think he studied with Reggie when he was a kid, like
Yeah.
when he was young, and so, and I've been around the Wootens just peripherally through my bass education stuff. So, like, you know, you grew up learning that stuff, and then all of a sudden it morphs into his metal playing in a unique way. And,
Mm.
people have asked me like, oh, how do you do all those slap lines in the metal context? I was like, well, I just adjust the dynamics in the field, but it's all the stuff I grew up, doing that wasn't metal, and I just put it into that context.
Yeah.
But it's like that. But like, yeah, it's like, it's the best metal musicians I've ever, obviously in the context of this, the best metal musicians I've ever met are people that like listen to everything. They like, and
It's
they're very open-minded about it.
to me, I'll relate it to the gospel chop drummers,
Yeah.
right? Like the gospel to me, when I find a ridiculous drummer, I'm like, okay, which church did you grow up in, bro? Because
Yeah.
like you were studying some sort of, you had some elder over your shoulder showing you these rudiments and these chops, and you were breaking them down to these little minuscule things. And then you got interested, you got blown out on music in general from there. And like now you look at these, I don't know, I'm thinking of like what's the the drummers, maybe Thomas Pridgeon, but like I was thinking of that one that was like is it Roy Jr. something?
Tony Royster Jr.
Yeah.
Yeah, Tony Royster is awesome.
Oh, like there's those pictures, there's those videos of him as a kid, just like being
the Tony Williams tribute solo when he's like 4 years old. Yeah, and an orange kit. Yeah, and it's him, and it's fucked up because it's an objectively really good drum solo for an adult to do. Like if an adult played that drum solo, I would be like, yo, this dude fucking rocks. And he's literally a fetus. Like he's tiny, and it's a full. I think the funny thing, and it's smart. That's a full adult sized kit. So they just maybe like, well, we can't get you a baby kit. You're just gonna have to reach. And he did it, but now life's good for him. I know he played with like Jay-Z, and I think he's with Katy Perry right now. So
is he?
Yeah, he's doing just fine.
And there was, what's the dude? Do you remember? Did you play with Suicidal Tendencies for? Did you do?
No, I never did.
Oh, okay.
No. But,
there was a drummer that played with Suicidal.
Eric Moore.
Eric Moore. Yeah, guy is a monster.
Yeah,
I
just very good.
Oh, I seen him at one of the crazy drum offs at NAMM years back, and there was like had 3 kits and set up, and one guy goes through the thing, and then the other guy they kind of like question and answer. I just fell in love with like his overall feel, and like what I love about a drummer that is that proficient and confident, where they there's a swagger on, and they're just like
it's very relaxed at the same time, even when they're going crazy.
Yeah, and that is one of the fun. I mean, as a spectator and somebody that does, touch an instrument, like I'm like, oh, that's like it. That is the epitome of what you could possibly seek to accomplish. To me, like is that real confident, loose yet like ripping feeling. You got that. I see that with you on the bass too. I mean, it's wonderful.
One of the things to give more praise to our drummer brothers and sisters is something that like I have nothing but respect for really good drummers, because unlike a bass guitar or a guitar where you could practice it in your bedroom with headphones, you need the space to be able to do that. So it's harder for them to practice. The gear is more expensive. It's much more a pain in the ass to haul it around, load it in, lug it in, record it. Like, oh my God, recording drums, like nightmare fuel. Like people, it is the single hardest thing to record in a modern band. You know what I mean? Like,
agreed.
Yeah. And, I was talking with someone about it, and, I know that within the drummer community, it's talked about and it should be, but it's kind of like, as other musicians, we need to give our hat off to the level of drumming that is coming up, and like the standard. Like I'll give you an example. Like in metal, like the average metal drummer in a lot of these bands that are popular now would have been on the cover of Drummer Magazine 20 years ago, because the standard is so crazy.
It's so high. Yeah.
Yeah, and like and I was there at the forefront of it. Because like I went to school with like JP Bouvet, and I knew Matty from Animals and stuff like that.
JP is amazing.
Yeah, he's an awesome dude. So like I've known these guys, and I've played with a bunch of them, and like Charlie and like Andrew Baird from that, and like I guess like, dude, the standard you guys set, and like what I see now, especially in metal drumming, like now it's just got, oh my God,
Yeah.
but it's just we got to give more praise to just like how in such a short span of time that has just gotten so crazy, and it's just also the fact that they're doing it consistently, and it's I've just felt the average standard for drummers has gone up like all around. And I know it's an access to education online and stuff like that, and all the
Mhm.
other instruments too, like guitar playing, obviously, bass playing as well. But for me specifically, drummers are the ones that just have been blowing my mind because unlike bass guitar, where like I could teach you all these things, and then you could sit in your bedroom until 3 in the morning. These people have to set up their shit in a garage. They have to go to a practice space. You know what I mean? It's just
Yeah.
so much more laborious, and to see them like really shining now, I think that drumming should be like I'm like, yeah, that's where it's at.
Bro, and cymbals, sticks, and heads are always being replaced.
It's so
Bro, like, and cymbals are not cheap. I mean, heads and sticks, like you can kind of get by like being pretty good, but like,
no, especially if you have like if you like let's say you've got like nice minor ones, like
yeah,
if you're a professional drummer and like you're like
right.
okay, you can't be using cheap. I mean, you can still kind of use cheap chinas, but like your rides, your main crashes, those
Yeah.
vinyls are like, and even with the deal, like some of those vinyls are like
Yeah.
are
You're still
you know
spending a chunk, man, just
yeah
to
man
even at an artist discount, for
yeah
that shit. And yeah, my best bud that drummed in my old band up in Seattle and stuff, he's I'm so proud of him. Like he's the reason why I actually, I have a close friend and we were in a band for a long time, and I'm like watching, and watching him go through all the different iterations of how he wanted his kit. And then when we started going on tour, it's like, oh, he quickly wanted to get rid of the second kick drum. Like he had an old school double kick, and
yeah
then dealing with the extra space in the van, dealing with the extra heads, dealing with all the stuff. And it's just a lot of fucking work. And so,
yeah it
yeah,
is man it
I,
is
if it's not for the faint of heart, and it could be, you could give up. That's like, if you're going to give, that's the easy one to give up, because I don't have the time and the space. My neighbors are always mad at me because I'm trying to play drums the wrong hour, the wrong place.
If you have a baby or a little kid,
Oh,
oh my
dude.
god, no. Like, at least with guitar, like the baby's sleeping, you put on headphones, like do 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 do.
Yeah.
You can shred a little bit with headphones, but like mad respect. I think that they don't get enough credit outside of their community for how like insane they like, and just, also they have to stay there during sound check longer because they have to strike kit. They have to put their kit up early. Like I can go get lunch, and like
Uh,
I'll be like, oh, I gotta get my kit set up first, and it's like, god damn it.
and dude, I used to be one of the first people to be like, yo, man, you should just get a V drum kit. And like, and then, and yes, the super nicest V drum kits are dope and can be helpful. But until I owned my own drum kit and tried to be, to learn a little bit of drums, I was like, oh, I realized fucking V drum kit. I mean, honestly,
Never same.
never, but it's not the same. The feedback is not the same.
No, no, no.
All this stuff. The cymbals are not at all, like you
Yeah.
just, they do bounce back, but it's like not at all the thing, and it's just like touch control on a guitar or a bass. Learning to strike the cymbals and pull the sound out of them, pull the sound out of the drums versus, and finding that finesse state can only be done with the actual analog gear. Because the other thing is just a facsimile. It's an approximation. It's not
100%. Yeah, yeah,
it's not a thing.
yeah. No, no. It's definitely it's. I still like. That's why like I say every tour I'm on, you know, unless it's like super super like bougie gig where like everyone's getting flown in for like a single gig and they have crew and stuff like that. I'll always help with the hardware case, man, because I just
Mm.
notice I always help. I always help the drummers with load in, load out. Even like if I'm like I did a wedding band gig the other day, and like just like I didn't know the drummer from Adam, but whatever. But I still like a part of me like, yo man, I'll grab your I'll grab your snares and stuff like that. Just because like I'm done so fast, and like
Yeah.
especially for like a gig where I don't have an extensive pedal board setup, just head, cab on a dolly, bass packed up in one thing. I can be loaded in and loaded out in like if I really want to hustle 5 minutes. But a drummer,
Mm.
like you got so much more bullshit to do.
So yeah, so let's tell us, walk us through a little bit about how you got started with the instrument. And I mean, I know you must be. I'm pretty sure you use a pick every once in a while on some of these gigs, right? Like, are you all
Yeah.
fingers?
No, I do whatever the gig requires. So like
Yeah.
with when I played with Angel, that's all pick style, and then
Okay.
what do you call it? I did a track on his new record. That one's fingerstyle, so I'm not playing with that. But yeah, with like my message, that side project I had, that's all pick. And like, I've done stuff like I filled in for Mike D from Kill Switch for one of his side projects. They're called
Mm,
Death Ray Vision, but that's all like pick, style
mm,
like that. But no, mostly fingerstyle. But I started when I was 12 years old. Um, my parents split up when I was 8, and after they split, my aunt came to live with us, me and my mom. So from Venezuela. So
mm,
what happened was that I kind of became her de facto like child. You know what I mean? Like in a sense,
mhm.
like so it helped my mom out a lot, and she very much doted on me, and I like would help her clean houses in the summer and stuff like that. But she loved it. Like she just loved keeping me, interested in things. It was always very encouraging and sweet. Um, when it came to music, she knew I started to love it, and she bought me one of those Ibanez starter bass kits
Mm.
from I think it was
Was it
Musician's
Geo?
Friends. Yeah, the Geo ones. Yeah,
Yeah.
and I remember like this is before like modern Amazon set the standard. I remember that like I think I waited like 5 weeks for that motherfucker to ship. It was insane. Like now like people are like, oh, I had to wait 3 days. I go like, bro, back then I remember
Yeah.
like she bought it and it was like only like $300. It was like it just took forever, and especially when you're 12, like
Hmm.
time goes like so slow. So it was like 5 weeks of being like, when's it coming? And then when it finally came, I fell in love. And then I felt that day when I first played it that like it clicked because even though the left hand I couldn't do much, the right hand felt right. Like
Mm.
because like there are some people when they pick up a bass, they like do like this like weird claw thing, like they like pluck it weird. But
Hmm.
like just from seeing it, I did it and I go like, oh, that just makes sense. The right hand at least. I was just like do do. So when I would hold a note, it sounded like a note, not like I was plucking. Like there's some students I've had that just like can't comprehend the pluck aspect of it.
Mm.
And so when I felt that, it felt like a good pair of shoes. And then my uncle was a classically trained musician in Venezuela, classical pianist. He had actually like, done a lot, internationally there. So like there was music already in the family. And my cousin, who was like my older brother, um, he was a metalhead. So he was like my like, you know, influence into bands. Like you always have an older sibling or friend or one that shows you albums and you get really hooked. The heavier stuff.
Hmm.
And I just kind of fell in love with it, and then just through middle and high school, got really serious with it. I didn't have the best time in high school, so it helped keep me sane. And
Mm.
then you know I went to Berkeley just because like it was one of the things where like, well, I don't know what else I'm going to do with my life, but end up working out because I ended up going at a very unique period with a lot of really great musicians, which I'm still friends with a ton of people. Well, hell, I'm playing with Neely. I met
Yeah.
Neely when I was 19. She was 18. I think I'm a year older than Neely. So yeah, I met her my sophomore year, her freshman year,
Oh.
and then like JP, Maddie, Manimals. I knew him in the cafeteria. I actually met Adam Neely. I think like the second week I was there. Yeah, I remember watching a video with him. He used to eat in the cafeteria with me. Like, a bunch of these people. I used to jam with Mono Neon in my room back
Oh,
in the day.
sick. He's so
Yeah,
ill.
yeah. Well, he's always been like that. He used to be called
Really?
Paul. Yeah, he used to go by Pauly Neon at the time, but he used to dress like that, all legit like that. He was a super quiet guy who'd come in and like, yeah, man, yeah. And then who else? Evan Marion. He used to be my string dealer down the hall. So it was like Nathan Navarro. Like Nathan and me played
Ah.
me and Nate played together with Felix because Felix's music at the time was so complicated. We were in school full time, so Nate would do half the songs, I do the other half. So we were technically the same bass player in the same band. Um,
Wow.
yeah, so like I was around a lot of these people that were just like really hardworking, inspiring musicians. And like so it kind of well worked. It kind of like I said, like it made you get motivated, and I think it was us also graduating like when the global economy was like you know is right after the recession, the Great Recession,
Around
like 2 years.
2008, 2009, like
I,
era?
I, I graduated 2010, but still, the stuff was
Okay.
still was
Yeah.
not you know,
Exactly.
especially the music industry at the time, and they're like, someone threw the cards in the air. So I think it became kind of a fight or flight for us to just be like, well, we're in this boat. Let's claw our way up, you know? So yeah, it's crazy. But then, you know, years and sweat equity and time, and now I'm here, and, you know, I still think there's a lot further to go, but I'm really happy at least to say that I've achieved a lot of my childhood dreams. I've done, you know, I've done a lot of what I set out to do. And so hopefully I can complete the rest of it. But, you know, if I were to, you know, get hit by an 18-wheeler today, at least I know that that I did do a lot of the things I set out to do when I was 12 years old, 15 years old. So that I can say is very cool.
That's a tall statement. That's great, man. I feel similar about my life in a lot of ways. I mean, there's still a lot of things I would love to do, but like, it's a good feeling to have the gratitude towards what you've, all the hard work you've put in and the time you've spent shedding, and then seeing that in all these different phases of your career be rewarded, you know, and then continually having work, people calling and being interested in it. And being around Nathan and Neely and all this, man, there's so many, JP, so many great people from that. I found JP through Drew of the Drew. I don't know.
Yeah, Drew's awesome. Yeah, no, we did a couple of videos back in 2018, I believe it was. We went down there and we did some videos with Maddie Rice.
Maddie's my fave. I love Maddie.
Yeah, she's ridiculous.
Oh man,
like
so
very
talented.
Yeah. So we made a couple of videos for Instagram back then. But I'd known Drew. I met Maddie that day, but I'd known Drew and JP from their old band Helicoptria when we were in college together. And JP was actually the original Felix Martin trio. Like when we were still in college, was me, JP, and Felix.
Wow. Okay. Wow,
So
I didn't know. Wow.
Yeah. So that was the original lineup. And funny enough, I'll never forget this. Tell you how small the world is. We were playing the Whiskey A Go Go. I think it was NAMM 2009, and we had a show, the Whiskey, like after. So JP needed a drum set, so we borrowed Matt Garska's Yamaha kit because he had just moved out to LA. He was just joining. So like we asked Matty for his kit so we could do a gig together. So it's like literally like tiny.
Hilarious.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. That's crazy cool.
Yeah.
I think, and didn't JP replace Matt on that big tour
yeah, he filled in for with what do you call it, with all the guitar,
it was Vi's thing, right? Generation X.
Yeah, with Yngwie and Thompson and Vi, and I forget, and Zach Wild.
Zach, yeah, that's what it was. Man, yeah, I just feel like I mean, he was already doing great things, but I think there was that's like an interesting proving ground, you know, like to back up all those artists, you know, as you know, you have to be a chameleon in all these different ways.
Yeah.
Go in and learn the vibe and then execute something that, you know, has a certain type of feel, you know, certain type of touch. I remember talking to JP and he's like, man, it's a brutal gig.
And he did it in not a lot of time. So he was learning stuff, I think, on the flight there and in the hotel room, like up to it, because it was very short notice. I think it was like Matt got sick and like he had to bail out, but it was like, it was, it's cray.
Him and Pete Griffin. Pete Griffin. Man, like those guys, everybody else is on stage for a certain amount of time. Those guys are like on stage all night long.
Yeah,
you know, for like 3.5, 4 hours. You know,
hard work, man. That's hard work.
and there's a sound check that's like sometimes, like I think Pete was saying, sometimes the sound check was fucking longer than the actual show because they're working stuff out, and those guys just got to sit around and wait till Nuno Betancourt and work something out, and they figure. Then it's like, I can only imagine, dude.
Yeah.
Hope the pay was good for that gig.
Yeah, for sure. But a testament to both of them for, you know, putting in that work and nailing that shit. Because that they're, you know, that's a gig where those two are the VIP, in my opinion. Like they're the all-stars, because that's just 100%. A lot of music. That's a lot of music.
Yeah. So when you were coming up and you're maybe I'm curious, like, what was do you remember what the first like piece was, or the first point where you felt like, oh, I should learn to use a pick, I want to do this? Like, how did you start incorporating pick? Was it something early on in a classic tune, or was it a modern tune?
Honestly, so I initially learned how to do it somewhat because I loved Yes as a kid. So like I remember like
Mm,
learning like some of Close to the Edge when I was a kid, and I liked it. But when I went to Berkeley, I kind of put that in the back. You know what I mean? Like I played some guitar, but my pick style was mostly reserved to when I'd pick up a guitar.
mm,
But then really what it was is just like I joined a cover band right out of Berkeley, just like, money, for around here.
sure.
And there was just a lot of stuff. So he was like, hey, like these are old classic rock songs. I want you to play with the pick. And so that I started to hone some of my chops with that. And then when it really, I started taking it very seriously was when Angel asked me to fill in for him. And with Angel, that's all speed metal and like
Mm.
very tight rhythm stuff. So you can't be sloppy. You can't do the whole like you see a bass player with a pick, but they're not nailing the rhythms. They're doing the half thing, or they're doing like the big O when the guitar
Yeah.
and they're just doing strummy strum. With
Done,
him,
done, done. Yeah.
with him, it's not like that. You are nailing those rhythm parts like him and
Yeah.
Jason do.
Yeah.
And so the like that very like Eister kind of like very and power metal stuff. And so learning his set was a very good stamina builder because it was just having that tightness, and especially the dynamics were just as accurate. All those little groupings would be like that. And so professionally, I want to say that like I came into my own pick style playing with him and filling in for him on that tour because it it would sound like crap if I didn't fill in like him and Jason were. It has to be like
Mm.
that unified wall of everyone doing that. And on a low B string, that's kind of hard on because
Mm.
I was using yeah, this is the one I used, Angel. So it's like you're talking about a 36-inch scale with a nice big B on there. You know,
Yeah.
it's a lot of string to control. So it was a good learning exercise.
Did you have a go-to pick, or was it a process figuring out what kind of picks work for you, or
Yeah.
do you have a plethora of picks depending?
So I used different ones, but I do actually remember now because I have one. So when I started doing it, I would use the Clayton USA's.
Oh yeah, classic.
Yeah, for bass, I still sometimes will use it. They're just kind of scrapey. Sometimes that's cool because you get like kind of especially if you're doing that. But I've actually switched to a Dunlop one. This one has kind of been like my go-to for bass and guitar, and it's these purple ones, the 1.14s,
Oh
the turtle
yeah.
ones, the turtley ones. The little chalkiness of it because they do kind of put them in a little bit of a thing. The grip is pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
That's one of the things. So like I if I'm on tour or if I'm playing extensively with a pick, I'll do the dime bag trick. Well, I'll razor them a bit.
Yeah.
'Cause if you
Score them.
yeah, I score them because especially if you're the music I'm playing with that, if it was like playing like in an indie band like the Killers or whatever, I wouldn't need to. But sometimes you have to really keep that tightness, but the dynamics have to be very meso forte. So these ones aren't scored just because these are here for the studio here, but normally if I am going to tour or gig with them, I'll take like a razor blade and score them a little bit. But this is kind of the evolution of like where it came from. I started off here, and I kind of did like that. But now these are kind of like what I like to use on guitar as well. I
Okay.
have some thicker ones, like this guy from Forbidden Engravings. He made me some of my custom bunny picks that have a grip on the back of
Oh,
them.
that's cool.
Yeah, so
See
these
that
are
again?
actually custom made. They had the rabbit on them, and they have a grip on the
Dude,
back.
that's
Yeah,
awesome. Yeah, I
yeah. So
forgot you're into bunnies. You got a couple of them or what?
I have one right now. Yeah,
Just one?
my Dutch rabbit passed away last December, but I still have a little lot. But I have like
Okay.
stuff to remember her by. But yeah, so
Aw.
but it's cool because this is gripped. So this is a kind of thicker one. This is nice for like warmer if I'm playing like warmer stuff on guitar. But for bass, yeah, it's between. I definitely like at least 1 millimeter for everything
Yeah.
because I definitely wanted to like strike through.
Yeah. You got to have something that gives you some stiffness and resistance. Too floppy of a pick on a low B like that would be a nightmare. sounds like.
Yeah, and it's also affected my guitar playing where like, like now I just kind of like it a little bit thicker. The one thing I can't get used to, and I was actually kind of reassured because every, Ledgeford, Angel, all these, a bunch of my friends, all amazingly guitar players. I think even Air Marshall does. They all use Jazz 9, right? And I was like, I cannot get into it. Like I think I think car series might use Jazz 9s. Like, like all these people like are shred gods. But then I met
Jazz
Neely.
9, you mean like Jazz 3?
Jazz 3, Jazz 3, sorry, yeah.
I was like, man,
And
is there a new pick that I don't know about?
no, no,
It almost got me.
yeah, the Jazz 3. But like they were always so small, I could never get into it. And then I met Neely, and she uses normal size picks like this. I'm like, okay, thank God, because you can.
She's a big stubby girl.
Yeah, but it's
those
just
big
like,
purple ones.
Yeah, but I'm like, okay, thank you. So it's not just me having like crap techniques. Like she was like, oh yeah, no man, I've never got into it. So it's a preference thing. But the Jazz 3s are the only ones I can't vibe with. But I think it's also just from playing bass. You know what I mean? Like I just get used to holding it a certain way, and so like it's a bias.
Yeah, Jazz 3 it's its whole own world, man. And I for a long time I had a good buddy of mine that back in the Ampeg days, he was like, dude, I only play with these little red ones, and I was like,
yeah, the little red ones, yeah.
I'm like, no, dude, no. He's like, no, just take it home and like just play that for the weekend, and then let's talk on Monday. Like, and I was like, all right, man. And so he started off a whole thing in my world where I was like, oh shit, now that's super, because it was thicker and more precise, and there was less room for error. And at first I was fucking mad about it, but then I started realizing, well, maybe I'm just that sloppy of a player and I just need to, man up and go for it. And so I played Jazz 3 for a long time. And then I started working with Dunlop, and I just got opened up to all the different kinds of picks. And I was like, okay, I've played all these things now, and I'm like kind of pretty much I like the regular, closer to a regular size, but I mostly play the flow shape, right? So it's a little. Yeah.
I have ones that I don't know if it's a flow one, but I do have what do you call it? One of Aaron Marshall's ones that I have one of these.
Oh yeah, that's flow.
That's a flow one. Yeah. Okay, so I have used those, and then I have one of Malcolm's little Jazz 3s here from Inferi.
Oh, that's dope.
So I like to collect, like if I'm like, with friends or whatever, I'll be like, hey, like, like if they have a spare one, I'll do it, because it's good to try it out and see how like their pick style approaches for stuff like that. For guitar, you know what I mean? Like for bass, I have my ways that just because, it's a completely different animal. Yeah. But for guitar, for that finite alternate picking, for kind of like how you approach sweeping, stuff like that, how you want to do hybrid stuff, it's good to learn how they incorporate these types of things. Rhythm stuff too. Rhythm stuff is a big one.
Yeah, man. The pick world is so diverse too. I mean, like somebody that comes into my room here and they're like, why do you have so many picks, man? Like, they don't play guitar, they don't know. And I'm like, oh man, don't even get me started. It's like this weird microverse where people nerd out about like tiny little thicknesses and tiny little like textures, and like, oh, that one's too slick, that one's too like grippy, that one, oh, it's too pointy, that's not pointy enough. It's like, if it was just 1 mil, like a 0.002 mil like thicker, it would be good, but it's trash if it's not.
It's also crazy because I have a friend of mine, he used to work at a rehearsal studio in LA, so he has like, it's in the other room, the recording studio, because I have a recording studio in my house I take care of for my friend. But he has like Jerry Cantrell's picks, he has Darren Malakian's picks, he has like Zach Wild's picks, and I would play with each one of them and try them out. And man, the same guitar, it can sound very, very different. And so I started to realize at first I'm like, oh, it's all bullshit. I thought it was just grip. And then until I started like doing it, I'm like, okay, I kind of get why like people like have their preferences, like especially brightness, initial attack and brightness. Like the ones that like blew my mind is he has one from Bill Kelleher from Mastodon, and the tip is
sharp.
It's
super sharp.
Yeah, and I'm like, whoa, that is bizarre. I couldn't get into it, but like also like I was like, it's just it's interesting to see how everyone is. Like Darren plays like literally it's like a Dorito.
The potato chip. Yep.
Yeah, it's a literal Dorito, and but it's fascinating because I mean they're all amazing guitar players and they all sound amazing, but it's just kind of like when I picked it up and Yeah, I'm like, whoa, this is so drastically different.
Those Tortex Sharp picks are the hardest ones for me to get into, but if I don't let myself play with anything else, I can get around with it. But those guys, Polyphia, that's all they use. They use the purple version of that, the thicker.
Oh, the sharp picks. Oh,
Sharp, yeah. And then for the longest time, that was also Jason Richardson's thing, but he ended up doing, or actually he was on the Jazz 3 for a long time, and then his most recent signature pick, I had him sitting around here, but they made a Jazz 3 size sharp,
Oh
super
man,
sharp.
that's got to be so unique. Oh, I would struggle so hard with that.
It's a cool pick. It's one of those things. It's like if you don't let yourself play with anything else, and that's really the key in a lot of these situations. It's like forget the other ones exist.
Yeah.
Learn how to play with this one, because like you're saying, like they sound different from pick to pick. Like material to material, thickness to thickness, all these different things. But that the other element is how they make you play. Like there's also sometimes, and that's what's kind of fun about just having like a crazy dish full of picks.
That's what I've been reaching into. I have a little like pick dish here for when I because when I'm tracking bass, I'll be like I'll try different ones before I do that.
Yeah. And you're just like all of a sudden you're like, oh, I this is random. I'm gonna try that. Oh, that sucks. This sucks. I end up gravitating back to the same like 5 or 6 picks that I'll kind of mess around with, but I kind of tout myself. I'm proud of myself that I'm semi ambidextrous, like I can kind of like I can pick both directions, baby,
no, for sure.
But there's certain picks I pick up and I'm like, no, I mean I'd just rather not, like there's weird stuff like this brand Attack Pick. They make some weird stuff that's got like this.
Wow.
I mean, it's nubbed for your pleasure, and like these guys are making, I don't want to give it too much away, but they're making a cool thing for Devin right now.
Nice.
That I don't know where it's going to go, when it's going to be released, but I started to try to make something for him at Dunlop, and it just like it didn't go anywhere. Because I don't think anybody really understood what he was looking for. But then when he saw these guys doing these weird nubbed out thing, he's like, oh, I think you guys get what I want, or could do what I want.
You could think outside the box of what I'm trying to accomplish.
Yeah. And it was like, because he plays like this is one of the last ones I made for him is kind of like the smaller potato chip, not the massive one, but that he would make like he actually sent me in because his whole idea was that like once a pick breaks in at the right spot, it gets worn and it gets like these little grooves in it. Then it starts sounding fucking really good to him, like to his ear, because like it will scrape on the string just right, and he'll get the right. And so he's been doing something really interesting with Attack Pick. I've only seen the renders so far, but I know that it's going to be, it's going to be fucking cool because he's a very particular person. And like I think he'll turn a lot of people on to something a little different. Here's another one of those Attack Picks, which to be honest, it's like a Jazz 3 type thing.
Yeah.
I don't like the grip. The tip is cool. It's got dual tips. The tips are kind of interesting.
Oh.
I personally don't like the grip. It's like weird. It's like just the nubs are too big. I don't know. It doesn't feel grippy to me, but I'm sure somebody loves it. But yeah, I don't know. Like the world is crazy with picks. It's cool. It's cool to talk to a versed bass player about your experience around it, because I know that in your world you probably have run into certain circumstances, probably early on, probably not as much anymore, but there's certain circles that are like, oh, you're a bass player that plays with the pick.
Yeah.
You can't be any good.
Like I think the thing about it is it's because and the bass players that like are those purists about that, like also probably have tried to genuinely do it well. Like like I got really, I mean, well, I started playing with the pick to play guitar, you know what I mean? But then like, so it was mostly metal stuff I play with my fingers. I mean, I wanted to develop that speed with my fingers. But
Sure.
when I developed that speed with my fingers, and I was able to be like, I can confidently play all the speed metal stuff and whatnot, I wanted to always just have the option that like it's a textural thing, it's a palette, it's like a brush. And I think that the only thing I would say to people is like, well, if you're only playing with a pick because you can't develop the chops on a bass guitar to play it with fingerstyle, you should develop your fingerstyle playing to be able to do it because there's a totally difference in attack. You know what I mean?
Mm.
Like a triplet with my fingers are just eighth notes, my fingers versus a pick versus me thumping. I do it with students all the time. I go like, we do this with guitar where like I said, like a certain section. So obviously live, you're playing the thing authentically and technically as accurate as possible. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I personally try to do anything I've ever recorded, technically, I can pull off live. It's a point of pride for me. Like, it's just where things like I don't want to be one of those people that like, oh, that solo's sick, but it was all punched in. And even if it was punched in, that like I can't then go and play it. Like, because I've met a million guitar players that be like, oh, here's the guitar profile. And it's like, well, play it, and then they can't play their own stuff. I've always been like, if I'm showing you a riff, or if I do it, like, oh no, I can play it. Like, and if I can pull it off live, it's a point of pride for me. But the thing for that was that like, where I show students, they're like, there are certain times, certain sections within a song, you look at a band like Mastodon, right? And different sections, they'll redo a section with a Stratocaster, and then they'll do another section of the same song with a Les Paul, and they'll layer another one with this. And it's all about the texture and the quality of the product at the end of the day. Where for some reason with bass, they're like, well, here's the one bass, do the one thing, and that's it. And sometimes that is appropriate, but sometimes I'd be like, hey, one section, if you really feel it sounds better, play it slapped. Another section, play it fingerstyle. One thing I do with my clients too, a lot of times, sometimes I'll be like, if they have a session, I'm like, hey, I'm going to send you an A, B, and C. One is fingerstyle, one is pick, one is slap, sometimes for a section. And you tell me which one you like. So I like to give the client the option of being like, oh, you know what? Texturally, how the pick compresses the low end for the section is really cool. But then, oh, I didn't think about slapping that part. Oh, that's kind of cool. Because sometimes, you offer the client more options versus being like, well, I can only do this.
Right.
I kind of think that if you hire me for something that they're like, okay, well, I can give you different options for something. So that way you're not limited in what your imagination wants out of, that, like it's why I also play fretless a lot, so like if it's something that a bass guitar can do, I want to say that like, I can do it. But really it's also like how you use a pick, because like also the funk stuff, like great players like Bobby Vega, like, like and Cody Wright and people like that who can funk it up with that, and it's like, if you have already a slap groove kind of thing, it's not hard to be able to funk out with a pick and it sounds really great. It improves your guitar rhythm chops. So like there's just a lot of reasons to do it, but I also just like doing the like, I almost got a gig. They ended up going with a guy that already had toured with them, so it wasn't like I didn't get the gig. It was just like one of the guys that could have done the gig was able to do it. But I auditioned for Glassjaw. And it's a lot of down picking like that. But that, man, that feels so good. Just down picking just like James Hetfield style on the low E string, just like that, and getting that clank and that like just pure punishing sound. It's very addicting. So I get why like some people just like if you're just being like just down picking old punk. Like I also grew up around people who loved like a lot of punk stuff and like that kind of rock. So that kind of aggression with the pick, I always respected. I mean, like the guys who could really like dig in and like had very even attack for that stuff.
Yeah. I mean, my brother played bass for a long time. We had a little he had a band that I joined, actually, really what it came down to, and he was always like a fan of like Crowbar and like slow like sludgy Bay Area stuff that there was no rules, pick, fuck, who cares, dude? Like, don't even wear your pants, nobody cares. Like like they just destroy yourself on stage was kind of the thing, it's like in long and they wanted. I really enjoyed that and watching him. I mean, he taught me a lot with like just opening up space, because like I was from the metal side of things and I just wanted to go and he would just be like
let it ring out for a couple of beats.
you know, and meanwhile you could take a drink, eat a meal in between notes, you know, like, and and on its head, I remember in the beginning, like just like him show me riffs like in the bedroom, like I was like, are you sure we have to wait this long for the next note? Like, you know, like, are you sure? And then his buddy Trevor Sellers actually ended up, he's from Chico area here. He's back in the area again. It's funny how, you know, you kind of talked about your community growing up and you came up with a bunch of interesting people and then you all went out and did your own things, you know, like this small town here, our old drummer Trevor Sellers, like he was like, we all thought he was the coolest drummer around just because he could feel these longer times that my brother was trying to do, where everybody else wanted to busy it up. And so my brother just fell in love with his thing. Trevor ended up going on having a band called, I think, Number One Gun, that was super cool, and a bunch of other things, but he ended up guitar teching and drum teching and stuff. And I think he's like Eric Clapton's guitar tech now or some shit.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, he was like tour managing for like Faith No More and doing all these like really cool gigs.
Oh, wow.
And we're like,
so he got into the,
he got into the thing, right? Now he's like a guitar tech, like and bass tech or whatever, for some of these biggest things. But when my brother would give me these riffs, you know, and then I would try to learn them, and then I didn't really connect until the drummer show, till we had practice, and I was like, oh, because obviously you can hear some sense of time happening in the background, knowing where the next note's going to come in, because I was just like just lost for the thing. I wanted to, you know, faster is sometimes easier, essentially, is kind of the deal, until when you have real devout space in your music, it can be shocking at first, like to try to like sort that out.
It's one of the things why I love, like, when I'm here locally, I do general business gigs. I try and do theater gigs and stuff like that because, you know, sometimes you're just playing a 3-chord song and how you approach pocket that way. You know what I mean? So I like that, you know, and it's one of the reasons why I tell people, like, you know, like, it's like try and take as many types of gigs as possible because, you know, like when I'm playing with Fallujah, I'm doing something very technical. It's very difficult music. Not, you know, it's very hard to play that stuff. And then when I go here, I'm playing like, you know, covers, you know, playing, you know, a Lizzo tune or something like that. But they're both valid and they're both amazing. So it's more about like, I always view technicality as like a thing. It's like kind of like, it's just a dynamics thing. So it's like kind of like, perfect example would be like if you go to get a hamburger at a shop and they're like, okay, have a nice day. He goes like, well, upon this morning of which the sun rose, I thus wish you a most pleasant afternoon, young man. In this year day, a year of our Lord 2020, it's way too much, right? Right. Thank you. Have a nice day. But imagine if like Abraham Lincoln went up there with the Gettysburg Address. He's like, yo, this wasn't a vibe. Slavery, not a vibe. Yo, these guys are dead. This sucks, guys. Let's stop it. Like, no one would remember 7 years ago, you know what I mean? Like, right. So it's the appropriateness of the context of what you're playing. And so I tell people, you know, is that it's not, you know, to strive to always be listening to the context like a conversation. That's why I think what Victor Wooten says is so good about having a conversation because, you know, it's, you know, you would know sometimes there are times where you have to be very eloquent, use more, you know, intensive language, you know, dynamics, how you're expressing things. And then there are times where just simple is perfect and it gets the point across exactly for what it is. So I always like Victor's interpretation of that because when I say like, what do you think about technical music or not technical music? And I go like, I don't view music in terms of that personally. I view it as just as conversations that just different conversations, you know what I mean? And certain gigs have different challenges, you know what I mean? So like, sure. You know, and sometimes something simple it's more about the slight feels and stuff like that, and you getting those feelings. Like, for example, like a walking bass line, once you know how to connect chord changes, isn't the hardest thing to do because it's chord enough. But the feel of how you're like are swinging it perfectly, or Latin music is a perfect one where like clave stuff is not technically intensive. You know what I mean? You're playing root fifths, sometimes a third, you're sliding in, but it's not anything crazy. But the feel is everything. But at the same time, if you try and be like one of those people like, oh, I don't do all this stuff, but then you try to play Fallujah, you're gonna sound like ass because you need that technical intensity, you need that precision. You know what I mean?
Right.
And so I always like that language metaphor that Victor utilized, and I've taken it to heart because I feel like it's the best way to reconfigure the mentality for like technical, non-technical music and stuff like that, and it's just different conversation.
Yeah, that's a great way to frame it, man. And it's funny because I have been trying to play some bass lately, and I've really been enjoying the instrument. I got this 4-string Thanos sent over, which
These things are awesome, by the way. I love mine.
Yeah, oh yeah, I love yours too. I like the way that is put together with the blonde fretboard. And
this one just sang, but yeah, so you've been enjoying your like just playing it and like being
dude, just because like I'm such an R&B 90s R&B kid that like mostly like most of the bass lines that I love are like either you said his name earlier, what D'Angelo's guy,
Pino Palladino.
Pino Palladino, or inspired by him, on some level. There's a bunch of great players out there, but so I just started looking around like what kind of cool like neo soul stuff that isn't too difficult, because the thing I found out, like, I mean, I kind of knew, you listen and you're like, oh shit, there's so much nuance in the playing here, and not just nuance in like the note choice, but
slides in and out, like
the slides and the pressure, and like, and I'm like, and I was telling my friend Stephanie, I'm like, she's like, how's it going? I love watching you play bass. I'm like, dude, it's deceptively, I don't want to call it difficult, but it's tricky because it's like the pressure, and like I know it's so easy to press a note like too hard in a sensitive moment because the strings are easy, like they're more sensitive, they're longer, they have this lower tuning. Like I feel like there's more tension in a guitar string. It's a little bit easier because I'm used to it.
No, and how you pluck it too. Like so, like when I play like R&B stuff like that, because I noticed that Pino would do this when I was in college, and I started doing that all the time. Is where like he would, if you watch a lot of stuff, especially when he's sitting down at sessions, most bass players, for his stuff, he's playing like this.
Oh, yeah, up on the fretboard. Interesting. Yeah, I haven't watched him enough.
Yeah, so he sometimes does that where he'll play over the neck in a way, and it gives nice tubby warmness, which is a very nice way to do, like, especially soft stuff. Like, I play ballads, a lot of times I'll be like almost like an upright, and it gives a really nice softness and roundness to it. But it's one of the things you said about pressure, where, like, don't get me wrong, most of the time I'm playing over the front pickup because that's where, like, the tension is evenest. If I'm slapping, that's where, like, the center for everything is. I'm trying to do more technical stuff, I go more to the bridge. But yeah, for like a lot of that R&B, all near the neck.
Would you say that approach there up over the neck is like a big part? I mean, it obviously sounds like it's a big part of the tone that you hear in the big. I mean, there's like a certain tone in neo soul, like, and I've kind of been looking at, like, it's like most of the high end and the mids are like rolled off.
Yeah, so a lot of those guys will use flat wounds for their stuff.
Oh.
But a lot of it is also just like where they attack. So I've noticed, at least the videos I've seen where he's like doing like sitting down sessions, he'll play much closer to the neck. I personally like for ballads and really chill stuff to play on the neck, if not like that, because it just gives a nice warmness. Because like have you ever played an upright bass before?
I've tried, but I don't. No frets, man. I'm fucking lost, basically.
Like where you attack, you attack kind of in the center, a little bit, like, you know what I mean? Like, and it has this like very kind of that, and it kind of recreates that in a sense. And I think I like about bass is that like where you pluck has such a massive dynamic impact on it. And so like yeah, like no, definitely like there's a lot of them I've seen like Raphael Sadiq and
oh, he's awesome.
especially him, Michel and Giocello and stuff like that, where there have been times where they're digging in, and if it's a softer groove where they want to be like more like really laid back, you know, I'm talking about like those like really chilled out songs. Yeah, they would do that. Like, you know, like where it's like a nice ballad, you know what I mean? Like, you know, like those like very slow jammy ones. I wouldn't be surprised if they played it. I've seen it done, and if like in the sessions, if there would be a file like where you see them like, if not on the neck completely, at least like right at the edge,
right up towards it, yeah. And does Pino use flats a lot, do you think?
He uses either or. So when he played like with the Who, he obviously uses round wound, like
yeah
that. But he definitely, I've definitely seen him use flats for stuff before, you know, like in bands. Like you can kind of tell when it glistens because there's no lines, like when the light hits it a certain way. Like flat wounds, like
oh right, it glistens, or like there's no
because there's no like the surface is smooth, so it just reflects evenly. But so I think he's one of those people that like, from what I've seen at least in this stuff, is that it varies on what he's doing. I think that when he played his like fretless stuff, it depended on the session, but I definitely have seen him use flats on his fretless stuff as well. You know what I mean?
I might have to call up Dunlop and get a set of their flats or something, because the problem is though I need to get another bass, so I don't want to just have flats and not have round wounds. You
know? The thing that I would recommend if you're not recording it like 100% for a session, just roll off your tone knob and play next to the neck and just like watch your touch. You know what I mean? Like how you're plucking. I can like a perfect example, like in a wedding gig where like I have to change stuff really fast, right? Like, you know, I'll be like, right? I'll like be doing stuff like that that's needs a lot of high end, and then I'll just change my attack.
Right.
It's all just based on my attack and everything like that. So you'd be surprised if like playing next to the neck, like try and play those lines like that. Also, the advantage you get with that is also because since the tension is looser here, you kind of feel more like the flubbiness of it. You know what I mean?
I see.
Where here, it's very tight, especially back here, it's very tight. So any like bass line, when I'm playing a bass line, you know, in the R&B sense, I would never play it back here. I would always try and do like something around it.
Yeah, I need to work on my right hand in general, because I mostly gravitate just to using my thumb as a pick.
Like that, like
do, you know. But I have a little bit of dexterity between the first two fingers. But like when it's just even a slightly complicated line with my left hand, and I get fucking all like mixed up. And I'm like, nope, back to the thumb.
It's its own discipline. That's why, like for me, I prided myself a lot when I was able to finally achieve like death metal and speed metal speeds with my fingers and be able to do it consistently, was because it takes so much longer. It's one of the things that like with students having articulation, be able to articulate all that stuff. So. You know, but yeah, the fingerstyle stuff, it takes a while, and you know, but for stuff like that, you know, that touch, especially when you're doing with those fingers, that's a big part of his thing. Is that he's using a very specific touch. It's fingerstyle over the neck, kind of, and it's just like the smoothness of the roll and whatever. But I feel like if you start doing it near the neck, you're gonna feel more authentic into it because the tone warms up a lot, and thus it gets you in the mind frame of like playing those types of bass lines.
Yeah, I'm gonna experiment with that some more, because it's kind of addicting. Like, because I never really got into covers personally. Like, I very rarely would ever try. A while back, I learned a couple of Soundgarden riffs, like something that's kind of easy, that doesn't feel like it's gonna take up my whole day. That I would like learn. It's kind of fun to connect with it. But growing up, I never really did that. But like with the bass, I'm like. It's funny because I'm like sitting here going, like, I know I want to play this instrument, but like, I don't know how. Like, because I just sound like a guitar player trying to run a scale or something it sounds dumb. And I'm like, and so then I'm like, I should just try and learn, like find some bass lessons for songs that I know that I love, and then and finding the gist of like what they're getting across, and that has been a strange revelation to me, to like that I keeps my interest long enough for me to want to learn the section, and then the repetitive part of it kind of like is just really nice, because like you're trying to find try to find the groove of where the drums and everything lands. It's super exciting to me. But
no, it's especially when you start getting really into locking in with drummers, it becomes like automatic, and you have that pocket feel. It's so like sensory satiating, like because locking in with a groove, especially if a drummer has really tight, good feet, and they have their shit together, it kind of falls. It feels like a puzzle piece filling in like perfectly. Like when people make those like models, and it's like it's carved so perfectly that when they put the two together, it becomes a seamless piece of wood or piece of metal. It's that kind of like sensory satiation like that you get. So like I've definitely had it where I'm just like, we're improvising, but I've nailed the fill, and the drummer and I, like, the kicks all match with my notes. I'm like, oh, that was great. Can we just do that forever?
Yeah.
It's because it sounds pre-planned, but sometimes you're just on the same wavelength. And oh man, like especially when you nail a thing and like fills and transitionary things, that's the thing that you start to learn, because like the main bass line, you can kind of get into it. And it's when you transition into a fill, and when the fills lock in, especially when it's improvised, like in a jam or with like a thing like that with neo soul, where it's more like, it's about the feel.
Yeah.
And then you just do something and you just lock in. And it just feels like you were both like F-18s flying like very casually in the same direction. It's very addicting. It's extremely addicting.
Along those lines, I have to just speak up about how doing any kind of like cool slide on the bass and getting it in time. I don't know if there's anything cooler. I mean, like what you're describing is the only thing cooler. Is like I've got a little bit of a kind of a fill with a drum thing before, and it's like, oh, that's cool. But an appropriate slide, right? It's sliding into the note or sliding out of the thing, man. I'm dude, I'm hooked, bro. Like I want to do that all day long.
I forget what it is. There's a Fallujah song where like everyone like cuts off, and I just let the note just like slide down, but it just sounds like a dragon like. And it's just so awesome, because you're like, it's a very specific moment in the set, and everyone's like, oh, that sounds good, keep doing it. But like it was like everyone just and I just go like and I just let it die that way. And I've always liked that. It's one of the things also, speaking kind of like where I was telling someone about editing bass, right? And it was that like, for guitar, let's say modern metal, right? It was about modern metal. And it was like guitar. I get how some people want, like when you have a riff that's like a very tight like breakdown or something that's a very tight rhythmic thing.
Yeah.
That I tell them like, look, you want it to sound really like good, is don't edit the bass the same way you would a guitar. So the guitar, you want those like little like tails at the end. Maybe sometimes you want that sounding real tight. With the bass, I always edit it where like there's still a remnant of the note picked there, just like a little bit of a tail. Just because it lets the part blossom a little bit more. It's like kind of like it's like it hears it, versus when it's perfectly cut together, it's almost like it's hidden behind it. But when you have just those little things, the bass has a way of like pushing that section forward a little bit, and it's a slight detail. But I found that whenever I do stuff like that, I just leave a little bit of like the natural
the bloom remnant or blossom kind of that on the end of the note.
Yeah, and I've found that like when I've given that to clients that way, they never end up like asking it to be edited again, because it just makes the section sound big, because it's not like that the bass is hidden behind the guitar. It's slightly poking through, and thus it makes the whole thing sound pushed. It like pushes the guitars forward, like it's someone like pushing it forward. I felt that's like a slight editing trick I've found that for me is like I keep my like if it's something's a really tight section, I just keep a little bit of the tail that makes it sound as human. Even if the guitar is edited to be like like very.
I like that's a cool hack. I'm gonna mess with that. And I just theoretically, it sounds like it's kind of akin to if you're like double tracking guitars and you don't want, if they're perfectly in time, then there's a phase thing that can happen, a cancellation. But if they're just milliseconds off, then it sounds fucking 10 miles wide.
Yeah, because realistically live, like no matter how tight of a band you are, most guitar players are not technically strumming at the exact moment.
Right.
So
Right. Yeah. That's the magic right there. It's like, you don't want. Yeah, that's okay. That's cool, man. I like that idea. It's a fucking interesting thing to think about, just because I try to track like little bass stuff here sometimes for myself. I usually end up trying to send it to somebody else though. I'm like, hey, I did a do. Can you do the so that it sounds cooler?
Yeah.
Well, tell me about what you've been listening to lately. What's your like, is there anything that you can't not listen to lately? Are you hooked on anything?
I've been pretty like conservative with like new music just because I've been traveling so much and having to like, so a lot of it's just been the bands I've been like touring with, you know what I mean? Like,
Sure.
and like their music and stuff like that. So like a lot of that. I listen to a lot of podcasts just to relax in the car, but I would say like I've been liking like a lot of like chiller stuff. Like there's a band, they're famous now, so it's not like anything like that. But have you ever heard of Crumb?
Crumb?
Yeah.
No.
They're kind of like they're very cool. They're like kind of like a little Tybee type band in the sense like that. Like
Oh, I
that kind
love
of very
them.
like that kind of like psychedelic indie kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's very chill, but it's very chill. They have a female lead singer. They're fantastic, very chilled out stuff. Like bass player, like they do a lot of cool stuff. It's very relaxing music. I've always liked that. And then like just because I've been touring with them, I love Rivers of Nile's new record. I love those guys. Um, More metal, like the new Monuments record is always like I always really enjoy them. I like those guys, man. They're fucking sick.
And Brown is just incredible writer.
Yeah. They're really nice dudes. I was able to hang out with them a bit ago, but those are the ones that like of new music that I like. I definitely was able to go to see the Lorna Shore aborted, ingested Angel Maker tour, and I was really pleasantly surprised because I'd never actually sat down and listened to Lorna, but I enjoyed their music a lot. But then there's a lot of stuff, like that just like like stuff that you're into, like like the trip hop stuff and the neo soul shit that like always gets my stuff going, and then just always trying to find more stuff. You know what I mean? Like there's like I'm always open minded, but the reality is like a lot of the new music I found is because I'm learning music for gigs. You know what I mean? Like so that's been a big thing. So, but I'm gonna try and make an effort this year to try and discover more new bands. You know what I mean? Like that's gonna be a thing. So,
well, bro, I mean, you don't need to if you're in all of them. Fuck. Yeah.
But,
well, when you do your top 40 gig, like wedding stuff, like, is there any like kind of guilty pleasures that you've adopted out of that? You kind of you have to play a lot of different stuff.
yeah. So all the Bruno Mars stuff I think is kind of sick.
It's kind of retro stuff too, right? Because it's kind of like funk, soul.
It's fun. Honestly, like just because the way that the bands are arranged, the Lizzo stuff usually ends up because the bass lines are really good, but the way that those arrangements work for a lot of those bands are really good.
Cool.
So the new stuff, like that shit's really sick. Like the Weekend stuff is great. I like the Weekend a lot. So his stuff for like a lot of wedding stuff because the bass lines are really nice and funky. Yeah, like the new modern stuff, you know what I mean? Like there's stuff like the old school classic, like Twunk ones that, are just fun that you get to have a little bit of fun with. But yeah, that's like that. Like there's a lot of 90s stuff that like I was like, oh crap, like it's fun playing, some of these like songs, like oh, Guilty Pleasure, which is now it's funny because it's like you can tell millennials are getting older and getting married and stuff like that. But every wedding I've played, I've had to play a Blink-182 song and a Fall Out Boy song.
Oh wow!
So, like now that's become the September of millennials. It's kind of funny.
Wow. Yeah, I haven't been to enough weddings to know.
Oh yeah, no, like every wedding since COVID has ended, I've had to play Blink-182 and Fall Out Boy.
Wow. Okay, man. Time moves on. That's the way it goes.
The
way it goes. That's great, man. And how are things? Like, when you're at home or even on tour, I'm like, do you have like a regimen around like just staying like healthy, and like how do you take care of yourself like as a
Um,
human?
yeah, I mean, it's always a work in progress. I wake up every morning. I have these instead of drinking straight coffee, like I started doing these like greens. It's like an energy greens mix that has like a lot of you know um, spirulina and like servings of vegetables, but it has like yerba mate as the stimulant, caffeine
Okay,
stimulant with it. But it's great. You get your vitamins, your servings of minerals, and everything in your veggie servings. It's great, and also I feel when I drink it, it's not like coffee with sugar where you feel a little like anxious. So
yeah,
I feel awake, but I don't feel anxious from it. Where like sometimes I remember when me and my ex used to like we'd wake up and go to Starbucks. I'd get a venti iced coffee every morning, like back in the day, and I just feel like I was having a panic attack by the time I got home. So that's one thing that I started to help myself with is if I want caffeine. It's not that I don't drink coffee still, but it'll be later in the
sure,
day. But like this stuff that I'm drinking here, it's they sell it like Wegmans stuff like that, but it's really great. It tastes good, but you get more vitamins and minerals along with it, and it's just I feel well rested, not that. Then I try and hit the gym at least like 3 to 4 times a week if I can. I haven't been good about it this week because it's been the holiday week, but last week
yeah,
I went like 4 times I think. So it's like I try and
great,
do that, and then as best I can, I try and cook it. I cook. I definitely cook from home as much as possible, and like I don't meal prep or like I don't eat the super healthiest, but I also don't cook junk food at home. Like you know what I mean?
that's great.
Like I'll like make my chicken thighs and my tomatoes and my broccoli and stuff like that. So I'm definitely not like one of those people that's like eat super healthy, but I'm not like one of these guys that lives by himself and orders pizza every night or none of that stuff. So like
Yeah, I'm somewhere I'm kind of like where you're at. Like I like to eat well. I try to cook as much as I can at home, but um
I also have
yeah.
a rule for me, and this is for me, is that I don't keep alcohol in my house. So for
Hmm.
me, it's like it's more like it's not that I have a problem with it or anything. It's more that like for me, alcohol is like if I'm gonna drink with people, it's gonna be with friends, like in an
Yeah,
environment. You know what I mean? I have fun with that. I'll go to a show, go over a friend's house, have some beers, or on tour. You know what I mean? We're
right.
hanging out.
That's
But for
great.
me, in the house, like I just unless I would expect company and they like would want to stay over and have that, like I usually just keep water. And so like that's kind of a little like health thing that I do is that so like in my house like unless you want to come over and have beers or whatever like that, in my fridge there's usually just water, and
Yeah.
it's also a good way. Oh, this is a life hack.
What's that?
Life hack. But
Yeah.
when people say they don't drink enough water, and they say that the citric acid is technically not good for your teeth, but I've been doing it for the past 5 years, and I went to a dentist checkup, and they said my teeth were totally fine, zero cavity. So maybe in the 20, 30 year long run. But I bought these little lemon squeezy things from the in the produce aisle, the little lemon juice ones.
Yeah.
Put 2 squirts in your water, and it's lemon water.
Oh yeah, I
And
love that. That's great.
you drink. I drink way more water because drinking a glass of just regular water. I know it's stupid, but it doesn't taste as good as lemon water. Like when I go to a restaurant, I always put a little squirt of lemon in there, and it has tripled my water intake. So for
That's great.
that's also one of the things I like about this green drink is that unlike coffee of course has water, but the nature of coffee is it
Yeah, it's
dehydrates you.
diuretic. Yeah,
Yeah, where this is literally like about
hydrating.
yeah. So one scoop, I'll usually get 2 glasses out of it. So I start the day with 2 full glasses of water plus that. So that's my big thing with when people are like, oh, I don't drink enough water, and they get like these jugs with the line. I go like, dude, just put lemon water in there. Like you're gonna drink it because it's gonna taste totally different. So it's not gonna be a struggle to drink that much water.
Mm. Yeah. Speaking of morning routines and coffee, I just I got this new Dan Sugarman freaking coffee
Oh,
blend.
that's right, Dan. Dan has
Yeah.
sugar.
It's called medium roast for dark mornings. So
That's awesome.
I'm
I
almost
gotta
through.
try.
Yeah, it's good. It's
I love Dan.
I love Dan too. He did a good job on this on multiple levels. I'm like, yeah, it's killer, man. And it's like it's dark, it's medium dark roast blend, and I always put a little bit of heavy cream in my coffee. Um, so I it's just kind of funny because I love seeing his like cartoon face
Yeah, no, that's genuinely really hilarious. No, that's awesome. So I knew that the Ice Nine guys were doing that stuff, but I forgot that he had his own. I was like, oh fuck, I gotta buy some Dan Sugar and coffee.
Yeah, dude, he's doing a great job, and I'm a coffee fiend. I love coffee. In fact, like I identify with like backing off a bit and doing more green drink. I've got a Purium green drink that I like because I will.
I'll send you the photo of the tub. I swear, it's
Please.
like been my like real savior with needing caffeine while like not feeling like I'm gonna like explode.
Yeah, yeah, and that's so important. That's why I try to put the heavy cream or some MCT oil in the coffee. It's not hydrating, but at least it like levels me out a little bit. It doesn't make
Yeah,
me. And if there's some sort of soluble fat in the coffee, then I don't
right,
wire
right.
out completely. But
Yeah,
and I don't put sugar in my coffee. But still, if you're just drinking coffee all day long, then it's not fucking good, man. Like you got to drink water and
yeah.
and eat vegetables and stuff. And so if you can do a good green drink that has a lot of that stuff in there, then that helps make me not
100%,
feel
man.
so crazy.
No, no, for sure. That those two things are my like at home thing. That like it was the lemony water and then the green thing. Those are the two little things that I do that I haven't seen anyone, or at least that is my routine. That's like I swear by.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that's important. Like we whether we know it or not, we all have formulas for our day, right? Like whether we really like identify with it in a way fully or not, and that's why it's kind of nice to know, like how other people get by, and what, even though it might not work for your particular chemistry, to hear or to do it a way somebody else is doing it, it's nice to hear because some people get away with some crazy shit, and I'm like, my body would never put up with that. I don't even know how, like some people can just do, and I'm like, I like some people can eat cookies all day long, dude, not gain any weight. And I'm like, bro, if I had 3 of those things, I'd gain 20 pounds. Like,
Yeah,
and I love cookies, dude. I love, and I'm all, that's my weight's
yeah.
always fluctuating too.
I mean, in the unhealthy side of things, and RIP to a real one because he was a legend. But I was watching the Lemmy documentary from I think like 2014,
Oh shit.
and there's just a video of him waking up first thing in the morning and just pouring himself a Jack and Coke. And I think if I started my day with a Jack and Coke, I would just die. Just like imagine.
For sure. Anything that involves alcohol in the morning, I'll be dead. I'll be dead by noon. Yeah, like there's no way. It knocks my dick completely in the dirt. I got nothing. Got nothing after that because
I,
like I'm just like such a lightweight in that department.
I can drink, but it's more like during the day, so if I'm gonna have beers, then I have beers. But like I remember when I was on tour, we went to the Hofbrau house
Mm.
in Munich, and so I'm like, okay, well I'm here, I gotta have like an authentic Hofbrau beer, and so they gave me like the thing, and I had it with like a pork shoulder, and like I go to sound check, and I wasn't drunk or anything, but I was like, I could have fallen asleep right then and there. I was just like, it was nap time. I was just like I was like, oh, like I'm like sound checking like Joel, my sound guys. I'm just like,
Mm.
yeah, because like so like I don't know how people are like, oh, let's go out for lunch and have a beer. I'd be like, if I had that at lunch, I'd be like at my desk like.
Yeah. Back when I was working with Ampeg and Mackie, dude, we did go for beer lunches, but I had to keep it to only Fridays when we would like leave early or something because
Yeah,
I was useless. I come back to the office and do nothing for the rest of the day. Like I was not getting anything done. So yeah, and it's like I'm more of a weed guy. I
yeah,
smoke. I'm like I toke a few times a day and keep a reasonable life, like, but like,
yeah.
yeah, drinking it's got to be afternoon, evening,
The
and
sun, the sun has to be setting. Yeah, the same with
it's
me.
better that way for me. I could go, it's summertime, but like it's like, oh, it's funny because the older I got, I love beer.
Yeah,
I love like sours and IPAs and stuff. So like
yeah,
I'm super into that. Even some of the lighter stuff that's like European is cool. But or even lighter like Japanese beers are cool. I like those too in context, like sushi
yeah.
and stuff. But the thing I found as I've gotten older, like I remember in my 30s, I was like, yeah, baby, like fucking IPAs, like give me the double freaking imperial, like super
Yeah.
skunky fucking. And now I'm like, oh yeah, I do you have a session IPA? Yeah, got one that's like a 4.7, because I could have 2 or 3 of those. But
Yeah,
like if
no.
I have one of those doubles, like I'm like, I feel like I'm just done for the rest of the day.
Oh
I'm
no,
like,
the thing, it's also like it's so laborious to drink them, like because it's like it's heavy, like it's.
yeah.
I'll never forget. Like I was like, this is when I was like in my early 20s. I was like 23 or something like that, and I'd ordered one of those like gasoline IPAs, and my friend was like, "Oh, bro, like shit, the band's about to start. We got to go now." And I had like half of it, and I remember trying to pound the things like, "Bro, come on, we got to go." And I'm like, "Dude,
Take the
like."
medicine, take the medicine.
No, and I'm just like, ugh. It's like I was swallowing a brick. Like I just like, or it's like, it just reminded me of like, he's like, eat a cake. He goes like, okay, that's easy. He goes like, no, eat the ingredients of a cake. Like so you just
Wow.
eat it. Yeah, exactly. So
Yeah.
that's what it felt like to me. It's like eating the ingredients.
Separate. Yeah, no, you eat the flour first,
Yeah,
then the
exactly.
eggs.
I'm sitting there, and then he's like running. I'm like, dude, if I run right now, it's not gonna. I'm like, so I like had to be like. So I learned my lesson with those. Like I didn't puke or anything, but it just reminds me of like that, like those beers where I was like, okay, hold on.
Well, so tell me, what would you like? Do you have any thoughts or concern or interest around what are the future things? What are the things that you'd like to achieve? Like you're looking at where you're at, and like maybe you have a sense of trajectory. Like, is there some sort of like monumental point where you're like, oh, I would like to collab with that person or do this kind of
Yeah,
album, or tell me about that.
yeah. So in the short term, well, I have some goals like within the next half year, where my drummer for Abiotic, Tony, is moving in with me in February, but he's an audio visual master. Like he's an incredible sound engineer, amazing orchestrator. So we want to start a Patreon together where I'm in charge of the music lessons and he's in charge of the production lessons. So I want to kind
Mm,
of do that where it's kind of like not a full on school because I think the whole school format's like that, but a Patreon where you can pick and choose those types of things. So that's going to be the short term where like that's more of a passive income thing that I want to do because I love educating, but I think that this format is well because some people just want to learn like certain slap licks. You know what I mean? They don't want a full mentorship program, or they want to learn certain things about how to like edit a video or something like that. It's something that we're going to collaborate on that way. So that's a short term goal that I think can be actualized very easily within the next couple of months. But in the long term, I want to keep doing what I'm doing, but just on a larger scale. Like because the artists I'm working with are amazing. I want to hope that especially I can't say their name out loud on here, but like as like I hit you up last year for the bass to do that hip hop record, and so
right.
that should be releasing this year, and like that more that stuff on that level approaches me. You know what I mean? Like, and the more I've kind of let go of worrying about the future, the more that some stuff has come to me like that, and I really want to do that. I want to just be kind of in a very self-sustained situation um, where like that kind of work just keeps coming and will continue to come. And the energy I put onto the universe, I feel like now that I'm in my approaching my mid 30s, it's like I feel like I've sowed so many seeds. I feel like I'm finally reaping some of it. It
Mm.
doesn't mean that I'm not done sowing, but like I feel like I have begun to see like, oh yeah, I did put in a lot of this to get there, so I can kind of enjoy this moment a bit,
Hmm.
and then just kind of finding more ways to just expand what I'm doing already. You know what I mean? Like, um, and I think that's the main goal. Like, you know what I mean? Like, uh, the bands I'm in, like, they all have like cool plans, and especially this year, we're starting off on a good foot with two really big, awesome things.
Hmm.
Like the G4 thing and 70K, and then from there, I'm going to take it easy and just focus on those other things, and then luckily things have just been showing up, and it's that's more my mentality. And a big part of that too for me is also like during COVID, I was uh, trying to think too much, and it wasn't my fault. Everyone was because we were stuck in a moment where it was, we didn't want to be there.
Yeah.
And so I got a lot of anxiety because everything was worrying about the future, the future, the future, the future, the future. And I remember the moment it hit me was when we were playing a sold out show at the Bluebird Theater in Colorado on the first Rivers tour. It was sold out. The crowd was losing its mind, and I closed my eyes during a part. I think it was in Sapphire. It's this song. There's like one. It's a very technically intense song, but there's this one part where like it's one song without. And I closed my eyes, and I remember having actively thought, "I'm fully present. I'm not in the past, not in the forward. I'm actually here."
Mm.
And it's something that COVID robbed from me a lot because I was like that. So I luckily have cool stuff planned for this year, but I'm not trying to worry about it too much. I'm trying to do like the things that I can control, like that Patreon thing.
Yeah.
It's something I can control and things like that. But I have a feeling that like now, like the gigs, are gonna come, and if it's okay, like the way that it's gonna happen, and it's just for me, it's the way that I've been able to keep staying. But luckily already, like like I didn't know I was gonna do the G4 thing last week. Neely just hit me up to do it. So stuff like that, just like I didn't know that I was gonna do all this year was gonna be all this Fallujah stuff. I got a text from Scott in February being like, "Hey man, condolences on your bunny, but Evan told me, said that he would want you to do the gig because he can't tour." And then I've seen half the planet with the guys this year. So, sometimes it's the moments you don't expect that versus like constantly being like, "Oh no, like I need to chase this thing." And I feel the more I'm just working on myself and just trying to focus on that and just I think if I keep doing what I'm doing and just keep doing that and try and take care of this, I think things will hopefully work out. And I think that's one of the things that I've done a lot. But yeah, so yeah, hopefully at this time next year, like I don't know, I land some make a gig or whatever. But even if it doesn't, it's I'm still in a position right now where I'm doing a lot of stuff I like with a lot of musicians I really like playing with. So as of right now, it's Gucci.
It's a really wise outlook, man, and I like the way that you're holding it, because yeah, the things that we grasp, that we reach for maybe a little too incessantly, they have a tendency to slip through our hands, right? Because we're focusing on the wrong thing, right? We're like, and it sounds like you got a good level head around like, oh, I can control X, Y, and Z. I'm gonna do my best to affect those things in a positive way and stay the course and see what happens with these gigs. So I'm curious. I got two more questions for you.
Yeah, no, of course. Yeah.
So if situation and whatever if there was no barriers, who are a couple of artists that you would just super love to collaborate with or be a part of their entourage?
Like if I could just play with them, I mean,
yeah, just like
I think my dream gig, just because as a kid, if like somehow Martin Mendez goes like, "Hey, I want to take a couple years off. You want to play bass for Opeth for a while?" And I'd be like, "Yeah, of course. Yeah, that'd be just like, yeah, fuck yeah." I'd sob uncontrollably, then I'd be like, "Yes," and then I'd shit my pants, and then I'd change my pants, and then I'd do it. Yeah, yeah, a lot of those like I think that would be my like absolute dream gig, and then just like working with like even like it'd be cool to like. Especially because I'm more emotionally detached from that scene, I think it would be cool if I landed like a bigger pop gig, just because like I could really enjoy it without having like the like emotional investment. Like with the Opeth thing, I'd be like, oh my god, like this is like I'm so emotionally invested in this. Where that would be like fun to be like I don't know, like play bass for like Bruno Mars, someone like that, because I love their shit, or The Weeknd, or like Billie Eilish, because I still think that they're awesome, but it's not like the same as like I have a tattoo of it on my knee. But it would be cool to experience touring like that, because like I've done a session at least on that level with artists that have like kind of been on that periphery, and it's a whole different world. So I couldn't imagine like, but I feel like also the reason why I want to kind of do it is because like I'm so used to like metal touring, which I feel like if you started metal, you can tour with anyone, because it is the grind, it is loading in everything yourself. I've met a lot of people, like especially like LA people who got to do pop gigs. And like they're like, oh, the conditions here are kind of rough, and I'm just chilling on a couch, being like, yo, there's food here in the green room. I'm vibing, dog, because I'm just like, because I'm used to be like, dude, that first tour I did with Felix, man, 7.5 weeks in a Toyota Sienna, self-promoted.
Oh
yeah, dude.
Yeah,
there was a show in Seattle where no one was there. Dude,
I mean, dude, I'm only laughing because like I've been in, Felix is an amazing musician and deserves people to show up for him. But like, I've gotten in the van and been on the road for 2 weeks and like had a couple of gigs where there was just people behind the bar working the bar. That's it.
And I had a joke with a friend of mine who made him laugh. Where like, because I remember a tour like this is like early, like my early 20s. Where like I was so stressed out and I was just staring at a Red Bull fridge at 4 a.m. and like somewhere in Indiana, and I'm just going like, what the fuck have I done? Like, if you never just like almost wept in front of a Red Bull fridge at 4 a.m, like I go like, don't at me. So I feel like with a lot of those top people, they're used to a certain quality of life, because even the wedding band, like it's very, oh, we're getting fed now, right? And I'm like going like, bro, like you've never just slept next to 3 dudes in the back of a van and like whatever. So for me, whenever I have those gigs, they're like, oh, Kilian's super low maintenance. It's so nice. I go like, yeah, dog, because like I'm used to like, but the way I grew up, like and like in the South Florida scene, like, you earn it through the shittiest venues. So when you play these nice venues, like I was in the Netherlands on this Rivers tour. They had like a Lazy Susan for the bus. They had 5 showers. They had 3 meals. They had free beer. They had giant couches. They had TVs. I'm like going like, bro, I'm chilling. Like, and I go, because you know what? I played a venue where it's just like, yeah, there's no green room, but there's a closet here you can warm up in. You're like, and
exactly.
It's the sour before the sweet, kind of thing. So yeah,
but I think that's the blessing though. Ultimately, it's the long form, long term blessing. Like it's the same. It's kind of a parallel to like not blowing up too soon, because you blow up too soon, you don't learn all the road lessons. You don't get the contrast with the high highs, right? So if you've played in a cold ass garage and had your fingers almost freezing up, and you've been on the road and like you didn't know where you're going to stay that night, and some rando says, hey, you can stay at my house, and then you go to their house and it's really sketchy. Oh, dude. I was just talking to my buddy Don the other night. There's our drummer Jeremy he used to live in Arcata and Eureka area, and it's like just pot central, right? And so one of their first tours, he's like, hey, call my buddy, because I was booking all the shows. He's like, call my buddy, he'll book us a show, man. We'll play with his band. He's an old speed metal band. I'm like, okay, cool. We booked this thing. It's like we get there, there's like we played a fucking old stripper like joint, right? And like there's he had to set his drum kit up next to the stripper pole. Like there was not enough room for the rest of us to be on the stage. It's just dingy as fuck. But randomly, like a couple of the people from No Effects showed up, like randomly, like it's like a random weird scene, right? And afterwards he's like, yeah, man, I got a place for you guys to stay, come over, man. And like we go over and we drive way the fuck out in the middle of nowhere. And it feels like that because it's at night in Eureka area out there.
Yeah.
And we drive up to this place that is obviously an old like fast food joint of some kind.
Oh,
like,
shit.
But he lives there. He lives in an old fast food joint and like an old restaurant. It's super weird. And we get there and it's just disgusting. He's a grower and it's just like he lives there by himself and like 3 or 4 vicious dogs. Like we were like, oh, you have dogs. We love dogs. And they're like all trying to like like almost eating our hands. And we're like, oh God. He's like, oh, I'll get them out. I'll put them outside. And then once the dogs get out of the way, we realize that the entire like living room is like just it's like this thick of dog hair and trash and it's just gross, bro. And I was like, I'm sleeping in the van, you guys, I'm out.
That's definitely what it is, sleeping in the van nights. I have a final story with that, but it's just I'll never forget it. So we were playing Charleston, South Carolina, Columbia, South Carolina. This is like one of the first Felix tours, like like when we were like nobody, and we used to have this thing. It was like couchsurfing.com. It was like a little website that like.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
Yeah. And so oddly enough, for this one, it was like these 2 like kind of cute like college age girls hosted us, and like not that we were thinking we were gonna hook up with them. We're like, oh, but what a change of pace, because normally it's like metalhead guys with venue like stuff like that.
Crusty dudes.
Yeah. So our brains actually were like, oh, these are 2 like nice college girls, so the place will probably be nice. So we come back from the show. And it was nice, okay, but it wasn't a mess. So we're like, okay, whatever, all right, good night, girls, okay, good night. We go to sleep. So half awake, and there was a fish tank next to me. I feel like there are little bugs on the fish tank, and all of a sudden I feel like I'm itching everywhere. The sofa had bed bugs.
Ugh.
So I wake up, all of a sudden it hits me, like I'm like dying. I'm like itching everywhere. Thankfully, I had put the rest of my clothes in a suitcase closed in the kitchen, so it
Oh
wasn't next to
man.
the bed. But I woke up, I'm dying, so I'm like at 4 in the morning. I'm like, fuck. I take off all my clothes, and I'm just like, my body's just covered in bed bug bites. So I'm like, no, what the fuck? And Felix is like, what's going on, man? And I'm like, bro, what the fuck? Like, I'm so pissed off because I'm exhausted and I'm just covered in bed bug bites. And so,
Please tell me you ran out of the bedroom naked and this is how the girls saw you and this is how you
no,
looked up.
no, no,
Oh,
no. But like,
bummer.
but there's a photo somewhere on my Facebook back in the day of just me wearing like we, because this is like we went down to Florida like at a Walmart in the Panhandle. There's a picture of me with a shirt with a bald eagle with aviators on, and I'm just flipping the bird to Felix, and it's just me like having to buy clothes to replace like what I
I
had the
see.
day before. So it's just him taking photos like, "Hey, Kilian, you look happy," and I'm like, fuck yeah. I'll never forget just waking up covered in bed bug bites. I was like, "Oh,
Oh,
dude, oh,
yeah, that's
kill
pretty
me now,
random.
God." Yeah, but those are one of the roads. So
That's
yes,
a good
I would
one.
like to play with some people like that because I think I would appreciate it more. Well, even when I did that session with that big artist, I was like treated like the king. I was like, this is great. I am
Mm,
enjoying myself.
I bet. Okay, so last question.
Yes.
If there for some reason, there's something happens and you're not able to do music anymore,
Mhm.
like what are you going to do? Like if you couldn't do bass and you couldn't do all this stuff and for whatever reason, maybe it's a big worldwide shutdown, it's another pandemic, or maybe it's an injury or something like that, and you're just like, you got nothing that you have right now. Like how are you going to deal with that? And what do you think? Do
I
you
think
have
I would.
a sense of where you would go or what you would do?
I think I would try and go full time and they're just trying to find something in the product industry because I always tried to get work like you do, like part time,
Mm,
whatever. But I would try and find something, even if it meant like, like Fishman is down the street. I would like go and like try and find a job, like even if it came to like assembling pickups or whatever, like that, like whatever, just to keep somewhat peripheral in it, or like I'd move in with Dave Dunsire to go work at Sweetwater or something like that. But
Dave.
for me, it's more like I think that with the thing, if it really came down to it, because I knew how bad things got before, I think I would have to find a way. Let's say if it's a pandemic thing, like to be closer to my family this time, because I think that was one of the things that like really fucked me up last time was just kind of not being close to a lot of things. So I'd have to make some kind of plan where like I'm not being close to like a lot of people I care about. Like I'm gonna ride this out with them. Like even though I have a nice living situation here, I'd like find a way to like, as much as I don't want to ever live in Florida again, I would find a way to like be like, all right, I'll move in with my parents just temporarily, just to have like that kind of feeling of like home and see my grandparents, stuff like that. Because like that's what fucked me up for a while. Because I moved out when I was 18. I've lived up here in Massachusetts since then.
Mm,
And I see my parents. I mean, I'm seeing my mom tomorrow, and like it's like I'm close with my family, but the pandemic made it where like you know it really reprioritized like the need for like really close friends and family, you know what I mean? I think that's the one thing that like the human connectedness of it. So especially with age too, you start to find out that like it doesn't even have to be biological family, it just means to be like
yeah.
people that you're like that are your like ride or dies, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I don't know. Maybe I'd move in with my best friend up in Vermont or something. I don't have a plan, but I think that I have at least a sketch outline. But the family one, at least being close to people that like I would be like, hey, I have like a safety nest of that would be the thing.
100%. I feel you hard on that because I was in LA when it all hit,
Yeah,
and I didn't really want to be in LA, but I was like giving it a try, for a
yeah,
year or two. And then it was like almost a year to the week or month, they're like, pandemic, stay home, nothing's going on. And I'm like, oh, well, that's the whole freaking reason I was here. Like, is just to
yeah,
like dive into the scene for a little bit. And so I moved back home essentially, and I hadn't lived here in 20 years. And,
yeah.
um, close to my brother, my mom, and stuff, and in a slightly simpler, version of life. Like LA is complex, and there's a lot of moving parts, and there's all kinds of things that can ruin your day, in a big city.
Yeah.
Whereas at a smaller town, it can be a little bit more, manageable, I guess. And so I hear all that, man. That makes sense to me.
Yeah, man. And it's just like I think COVID really just made it seem like it made me realize that like it's kind of like people, like other people that I care about are a real currency for
Mm.
me. And that like it's not something I ever want to take for granted ever again. You know what I mean? Like that connectedness, like like even like it's of course my career and going on stage, but it was just like even like the first rehearsals with Fallujah, where you're just like I'm in a room with a bunch of dudes in a band again. Like it just like that, like you're just shitting, like sending each other memes and like you're laughing at jokes, you run the songs, that kind of camaraderie, that kind of just like being in that space with those people.
Mm.
For me, that's what I found is that like and this is me, like, and it's not that I'm not a codependent person. So it's like like I spend time independently, but like I definitely find that my mental health greatly improves when I just am around friends. Because if I'm having a shit day, like I'm just having like a real downwind, mean brain day, if
Hmm.
I go, like, I'll just go and see a friend, just hang out and shoot the shit. Even if it's just them, like, playing video games and, like, I'll hang out with them at night, or whatever, or meet up with that. It really does wonders for my stuff, like, to reset my brain like that. And just having a conversation. I have my best friend in the whole world. We still talk every day. We went to high school together. But we pretty much have, like, an open phone policy where, like, anything we can talk. And they got me through the pandemic and they said that I got them through it. So,
I
that
love
kind of
that.
connectivity, like to have someone you can just call, be like, oh man, my brain's like that, and they're really good at refocusing stuff, and I
Dude,
try to be that way for them, and so
that's amazing, bro. Because I feel like that's one of my lifelines as well. Like my good friend Stephanie, I can call her, she can call me, and she'd be like, "Dude, fucking shit sucks."
yeah,
And I'm like, "Tell me about how bad it sucks." And
yeah,
she's like, "Can I tell you about why I want to jump off a bridge today?" I'm like, "Yeah, yeah. Tell you why I want to jump off a bridge." And when you're done, if you've got space for it, I'm gonna tell you why I want to jump off a bridge too. Let's go. And it's from the outside in, sometimes our conversations, and you probably have this with your friend too on some level, right? Like, because you're so comfortable on the outside looking in, sometimes you can say, "Oh, you guys talk about suicide," and like, or like, and it's like, no, yeah, yes and no, it's like,
no,
um
but it's
it,
about being allowed to be vulnerable.
yeah. And it's like to say, "Hey, look, the truth is, it's like, fuck, man, sometimes it feels like my situation will never end, and that's why I need to say something out loud, right? And I need to be vocal about, and just to let off the steam. You're like, fuck,
No, it
I
is,
want.
and that safety to be able to do it, and it's also because sometimes when you say something out loud, all of a sudden, sometimes you realize the absurdity of it. So sometimes you're like, oh, that's not really true.
Dude, that right there. Yeah.
But because in your mind, you start going to cycles, and you can catastrophize, stuff like that. And sometimes saying it out loud, people are like, oh no, dude, your situation's not that bad. And it's not them gaslighting you, it's just more the fact that they ground you with the perspective like, no, dude, you're fine, bro. Like, don't worry about it.
Yeah.
We'll take care of this. Like sometimes moments are like an example, like I was freaking out for a bit because like my roommate had to move out. Basically, he thought he could give me more time to move out, and he couldn't. So I thought he was moving out on January 1st. I'm like, oh crap. Like, so I'm like, for like a couple hours, I'm like, fuck, like, oh, I'm gonna have to pay double the rent, all this stuff, like, and all of a sudden, my friend Tyler was like, dude, just hit up Tony, and like, I didn't think about it, and then Tony's like, dude, I'm down. So like, what would have been a huge problem resolved itself, but it took one friend just being like, oh, dude, did you think about this? And then it like, I pivoted towards it, and it just, I was like, oh, and then
Yeah.
immediately, like, but it was one of the things where it was, if I had only been in my head and didn't verbalize the stress to a friend, being like, "Hey, I'm stressed out," and then they go like, "Oh, I think I have. Have you thought about this solution?"
Yeah.
But not in any gaslighting, patronizing way. Just kind of like, "Oh man, like, have you tried hitting up this person? Like, that's a direct solution, not a platitude." And then
Yeah.
ended
And
up being the thing.
that's awesome. Yeah. And I for me too, my friend Stephanie, like, we both kind of give each other license to be a little tough love with each other, you know.
Yeah.
And the other day I was just like, man, this sucks, and I'm worried about that, and I'm not really that person that much very often anyway, and so I think it's like it's extra easy for her to be like, maybe you should shut the fuck up and do something with yourself. Like, are you kidding me? Like, you have all the tools, you know, the thing, you know. And what I love about her in particular, she reminds me about like who she knows me to be, right? And so I'm like, oh, I forgot that in those moments, those catastrophizing moments, I'm like, I forget the empowered version of myself that would make better statements and would corral my energy into the right place. And you know, and she's like, no, I'm pretty sure you need to stop being a bitch and like maybe like you know, go do something positive with your life. I'm like, oh yeah, maybe I won't be a bitch today. That's a good idea.
No, it's true, and sometimes you do kind of need to just get like slapped out of it a little bit. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I've always found that, like, you know, sometimes it's that, and like, but the key there though is like, as much as like, because I do believe in the internal discipline and that, but like, we are social creatures. You know what I mean? And I think that one thing that COVID made me really, I mean, I understood it before, but it really made me appreciate this kind of thing. Like, no person's an island. You cannot function, and no matter how much people want to grandstand it and like do whatever, it's like it's your social network, and it's in the real wholesome sense of like the people that are going to be there for you. Because like there are a lot of people who maybe are good at manipulating people and getting financial things, but they don't have people that genuinely care about them, or everything's transactional and stuff like that. Where like, you know, the social equity of having people that genuinely just care about you, that's the stuff that'll get you through life's hardest moments. Because, you know, again, like what I said, like we assumed the permanence of certain things.
Right.
Like COVID, I assumed that 2019, that like into 2022, oh, like a bunch of cool stuff was happening. All these assumptions about what was going to happen, and I think that that's one of the things. Top it off with two last little things is like, it's the assumption of all the best laid plans of mice and men kind of thing. That so it's more the fact that just assume that chaos, it just is. It's in the universe. It's one of the things that I like, even though I'm not a religious person. I like that Eastern philosophies address chaos as just being an element in nature. You know, waves come and crash and destroy things. You know, people get sick. The universe is indifferent to your sense of order. What you can do to have order in your life is to just accept that that is a thing and adjust your order to how chaos reacts. Where people a lot of times are like, well, no, if I live my life this way, I will prevent all these bad things from happening. I'd be like, look, you can have good habits and discipline, which are good things to prevent bad things from happening, but 100%. But hey, man, someone's going to rear end your car at a stoplight while you're on the way to the gym while you're listening to podcasts. Someone, you know, like someone you care about will get like really sick. Someone's house will burn down. Like it has nothing to do with their own personal responsibility and discipline. Just like it can happen. And I think that's, and I'm bringing back more to the COVID thing where like, like, you know, I remember the week that shit hit, I was like in the best shape of my life. I was at a gig. I was like I think I was like down to like 160 pounds. I almost had a six pack and stuff like that. I was like full, like, yay, I'm actualizing all my potential and all of that. And then the universe like, bet, you know what I mean? And so for me, and I'm not saying that in a negative way. It's more the fact that just like I've accepted that those chaotic elements are something you cannot fully or will ever be able to control. And that I think that one of the things that we could do as people is to be like, still do all the good habits and stuff like that. It's just that adapt to things if those things happen, to accept that like it's gonna happen. Like I like letting go a bit, like going with the river a bit, I think is one of the things. It's why like I think that it's why I don't like a lot of like Sigma grind culture at all, because it's not the messaging of discipline and hard work. Of course, you know, those things set you free, like you know, having routines, like putting in a work ethic to achieve the things you want. That's how you will get it. But the whole like doing it at the cost of your mental health and your loved ones and your relationships, that is something I think is super bad for people. And I think that like where you're like, oh no, I know I'm freaking out and I'm losing my mind, but like, no, we're gonna get it. And then all of a sudden, your mental health goes spiraling off of a cliff, and now you're not happy because you sacrificed everything towards that. And I think that the thing was before COVID, I was very much more like, no, like blinders on, we got to do this. And now I'm more like yesterday, like because it's like the holiday week for me. I just went and drove my friend to Maine. He's one of my best friends, and just drove him to his house because he has Lyme disease. So I just took the trip up to Maine to drop him off, said hi to his parents, and came back and like practice. But that was the day. It was just spending time with my friend, like having this little adventure to take him up to his family's house in Maine. But could I have done stuff to like hustle on social media that day? Sure, but like for me, it's that memory of just spending time with my friend, and that was like for me more important in that moment for me.
I like that.
That's
it's a delicate balance, man. It's a delicate balance, and
balance, yeah.
And what you're outlining is like the predictability of unpredictability, right?
Yeah.
So like we can, and so that if we were to allow ourselves to, not even necessarily predict it, but to know a certain amount of unpredictability is always at play, right? So that's one of the things, so that we don't get too hard and fast or precious with our goals and our rigid regimen, right? And that may produce a lot of successful results, right? But at the end of the day, like, can we are our values in the right place? Like ultimately, are we valuing our time spent with other humans? Because we get what gets lost, I think, in the real rigid regimen is that we're like, no, it's more of that, like, every man is an island, that type of thing. It's like trying to say, no, I'm ruggedly independent and I don't really need other people. But yet, you can't do anything in this world without other people. That's like a very solid fact. And to really tune into and become sensitive to the whole host of ways that we don't even know ourselves, and we can't become ruggedly successful without people following or tuning in or being a part of a community, right? Like there's no possibility unless there's a web there to lean on and be interdependent with.
And those people are how you get through chaos.
100%.
You know what I mean? Like, because like that's what I said. Like, like how did people, like, like it's even in tribal times, it would be the village together surviving the flood or whatever. You know what I mean? So it's actually how you become stronger through to handle those unpredictabilities, is because you have people that are like, well, okay, the wave's hitting, but it's hitting us together, so we can think collectively of a plan of how to survive this. You know what I mean? And thus you survive and you actually can thrive because you had those actual things. You know what I mean? Like, and I definitely think that's it. So I guess that's my final thoughts is,
I love it.
Love your friends.
Yeah. Love your friends, love yourself, man. And do your best. That's all we can ever ask for. So
indeed, my
dude, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me, Kilian.
Thanks, man.
You're a great dude and an even better player. Thanks, like, thanks for laying the lowdown for so many different groups and giving us all these opportunities to witness your craft. And I look forward to what's potentially going to blow up in the next year or so. Like there's in what one direction or another. There's lots of seeds that you have planted.
Yeah, let's fingers crossed. Likewise, man. But have a great day, okay, man? Happy holidays.
Thanks, man. You too.
Players Pick Podcast, Picks and Perspective with Chrys Johnson.
This episode of Players Pick Podcast is brought to you in part by our good friends at Jim Dunlop Guitar Product, Kiesel Custom Guitars, Boswell Pro Audio and Microphones, Happy Cable Company, Copper Sound Pedals, and our favorite coffee company, Road Roaster Coffee. Go to roadroastercoffee.com and use coupon code PLAYERSPICK to receive 15% off all orders, ongoing, forever. Well, isn't that nice?